Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Suki Kaje, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. Prologue: A Dream and Its Fruition. It all began with one unforgettable declaration.
Let's become treasure hunters.
To kids no more than 10 years of age, those words marked a change that would shape our lives forever. A friend of mine, one of my childhood friends, had been the one to speak them.
Let's become treasure hunters. Let's seize fame and fortune from the treasure vaults around the world with only one goal in mind: to become the strongest heroes in the world. If the six of us work together, we can make that goal a reality.
This friend had always been reckless, but he was also strong and brave. There was no real evidence to support his confidence in us, but his vision of our future seemed to shine before us like gold. Another friend, the most dexterous and fastest among us, was the first to second the idea. The bookworm of the group timidly followed suit, and our quiet but reliable friend gave a big nod in agreement. My little sister, who always tagged along behind me, waited for my response. I was in. Treasure hunters, those who ventured into ruins throughout the world to loot their relics, had always held the most coveted of professions. No other career offered a quicker path to everything that mattered in the world: power, fame, and wealth. Power, fame, and wealth. Of course, treasure hunting also came with its risks. There was an abundance of stories of hunters who had fallen to sinister traps, terrifying monsters, or peculiar phantoms. Even the tale of one particular hunter, which had served as inspiration for my friend's declaration, included plenty of gruesome details, but those risks were mere dewdrops to the roaring flame that was our yearning for adventure, an adventure that began from the very day we affirmed our dream aloud. The first step of our journey to becoming hunters was training. We each took on a specific role and began honing our skills. Our strong, brave, and reckless friend became an unparalleled swordsman. The fastest and most dexterous among us became a thief, one who didn't necessarily steal things but deactivated traps and guided their party through dungeons. Call it a blessing or a curse, each of my other friends also possessed extraordinary talent for a particular aspect of treasure hunting. As we began that training, it didn't take long for those talents to show themselves in all of them, but not in me. I was the only one of the six of us, my four friends, my sister, and me, who remained below average in every regard. The only one who failed at everything. The only one who saw no path to becoming a hero. 5 years had passed since then. It was a miserable morning. Thick black clouds shrouded the sky, and the constant drone of raindrops hitting the earth thrummed in my ears. The smell of water and dirt hung in the air, the ground muddied by 3 days of sucky weather. Dim gray daylight illuminated the streets. A long line had formed before a sturdy stone building, composed of men and women of all ages. Some of them gazed ahead with soulless eyes. Some were shouting about something, and a few possessed the features of non-human species. The only thing everyone in line had in common was that they looked ready to kill. They were dressed in weathered armor made of some sort of leather, or thick coats that covered them from head to toe. One or two even sported full sets of steel-plated armor. Many among them carried swords or fireworks. Not party a prize still to tail, now some a chod of leather unfold. Not party a prize still to tail, one a prize. This one corner of the otherwise desolate street, deserted because of the rain, was awash with a freakish fervor. Everyone in that line had come seeking the faintest flicker of a chance to prove their strength to well-known treasure hunters and be accepted into their parties. Over the course of history, treasure hunters had always held the most coveted of professions. They traveled to ruins all over the world, treasure vaults that depicted lost civilizations, to obtain the relics within them. The job was perilous, but with enough talent, hunters could score power, fame, and wealth, the kinds of splendor only nobility or renowned merchants could hope to obtain. Most hunters worked in parties of several members. Working in a party of veteran hunters was far less risky than hunting alone. By the same token, active hunters were always on the lookout for capable additions to their parties. The event hosted here today was intended for that very purpose. All this rain had stoked my hopes for a lower turnout, but alas, there they all were. I sighed and fell to the back of the line. Without an awning, or cover of any kind really, those waiting before me were soaked to the bone. I pulled my hood down as far as it would go, and shrunk into my coat while I waited. There was something isolating about standing alone in such a long line.
Oh, why the hell's it so crowded? I'm in already.
The frustrated shout from close to the head of the line made me shrink further into my coat. The line was moving slow enough, but the scummy weather was making things worse. I got why he was frustrated, but we were all in the same boat. Most hunters like him had a knack for fighting and a very short fuse. The last thing I wanted was to have a brawl break out around me. One facet of a hunter's talent was their stature. While my height was close to that of the average man, most men in line were at least a head taller than I was. They were freaks with enough strength and courage to take on monsters far deadlier than humans were ever meant to face. All I could do was pray that the situation would resolve itself before things got ugly. Fortunately, my prayers were heard for once, because no further commotion could be heard from the head of the line. The line progressed ever so slightly. As I remained hunched under my hood, careful not to make eye contact with anybody, the person one place ahead of me turned around, her beautiful blue gaze fixing on me.
Hey, you looking to join a party too?
Yeah. Ignoring the question might have caused me more trouble, but I kept my eyes off hers, just in case. The girl, clearly a hunter in her late teens, had well-kept light brown hair and big blue eyes. She wore a long coat with a thick belt that had a sizable pack attached to it. Her attire was what you might expect to see, worn by many a hunter, but her unblemished hair and friendly expression were uncharacteristic of those familiar with danger-filled treasure vaults. Not only that, but her clothes were almost spotless. Female hunters weren't uncommon with how well hunters were treated in society, but in my experience, hunters that looked like this one were one of two types: those who were new to the game, still full of hopes and dreams, or those with extraordinary talent for harem, who shone brighter after every adventure. Bona fide freaks like my old friends. I was about 90% sure the girl before me was the former, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. This industry was chock full of freaks in human clothing. With a chuckle, the girl met my mistrustful gaze before returning to her cheerful expression and offering me her hand. At least she wasn't the type to throw a punch for an introduction instead of a handshake. I secretly assigned her a threat level E. E was a rating I assigned to hunters who looked safe to interact with, at least on the surface.
The name's Ruda, level 3. Newly level 3, but that's beside the point.
Level 3, that meant she was middle of the pack and much more skilled than she looked. I silently upped her to a threat level D. At the very least, she was no rookie. The Explorers Association, or the Association for short, the overseers of the treasure hunting world, ranks hunters by levels that were widely regarded as an indication of a hunter's prowess. As a result, hunters commonly included their level in their introductions. Statistically, 70% of hunters never progressed past level 3. Ruda clearly had potential to have reached that level at her age. Keeping my guard up couldn't hurt. Mid-grade hunters were still inhumanly dangerous compared to the average citizen. I opened my mouth to speak. Since I'd run here without drinking a drop of water, my voice came out hoarse. I'm Krai Andrey. Nice to meet you, Ruda. I refused to shake the hand she'd extended. In my 5 years working as a hunter in the capital, the most valuable thing I'd earned was a sense of danger. If I took that hand, Ruda could toss me to the ground, crush my hand, or straight up kill me the moment I shook it. Of course, the same possibility also applied to me not returning her handshake. Ruda frowned for a moment before switching back to her smile.
Are you a solo hunter too? Everyone's so on edge here. It kinda sucks.
I didn't answer.
I've always gone it alone, but I feel like I've hit a wall recently. Then I happened to hear about this big call for hunters.
She rested her hand on the dagger sheathed on her belt. Treasure vaults were filled with various traps and hidden pathways. Since the only weapon she carried was a suboptimal choice for combat, she had to be more skilled at disarming gimmicks than fighting monsters. In any case, a solo hunter was no joke. I quietly bumped Ruda up to a threat level C. Navigating a treasure vault required several skills, and acquiring all of those alone was no easy feat. Not that going solo didn't have its own merits, but diving alone into a veritable minefield seemed, in my opinion, nothing short of crazy. The hunter population had more than its fair share of lunatics, but solo hunters had, according to my experience, an even higher ratio of crazy. Even the association recommended forming a party before setting out to explore a vault. This meant that Ruda, despite her approachable disposition, had either a major personality flaw that made her incompatible to hunting in parties, or some other reason that was more trouble than it was worth. Both were a hard pass from me. Unsure of what to say, I tightened my jaw into a smile, another one of the very few skills I'd acquired over the past few years. When in doubt, just smile and nod. Alone? Isn't that a death wish?
Sure is, that's my point. I gave the White Wolf's Den a go, but it was a little more than I could handle. So I thought I'd come join a party. I figure that place is doable with 5 or so level 3s.
Ha! The White Wolf's Den? Do you have any idea where you're at?
The derisive tone of the interruption caused Ruda's expression to harden. It had come from a mountainous man ahead of us in line. The man wore a set of metal-plated leather armor under a blood-stained coat. In stark contrast with Ruda, he exuded the air of a seasoned warrior, right down to the battle-worn hilt of his sword. I grimaced. The vast majority of hunters were always jonesing for a fight, and the shortness of a hunter's fuse correlated with their strength in combat. Association members often joked that bloodlust was part of a true hunter's makeup. Lo and behold, Ruda yelled right back at the man 2 heads taller than her.
Was I talking to you? What's your problem?
Here, level 3, the White Wolf's Den. This isn't a hangout for rookies.
The large man's cheeks twitched into a sneer. The rest of the people in line turned their attention to him and Ruda, some in annoyance, others out of curiosity, but not one of them moved to stop them. I sneakily took a step back. Avoiding fights whenever possible was another important lesson I had learned since becoming a hunter. Due to their advantage in strength, hunters were prohibited from harming civilians. If they were to be caught in the act by the knights that keep the peace, they would face criminal charges and a blow to their pride. Even the most quick-tempered of hunters made sure to keep to this code. On the other hand, fights between hunters were overlooked for the most part. So, despite me being as weak as any civilian, no one would rescue me if I found myself caught up in a hunter's brawl. Worse, they would blame me for not fighting back, and call me pathetic. What had the world come to?
Everyone here's ready to kick ass and take names? I mean, come on, the steps of recruiting. That lot might be new on the block, but they're gonna be serious stuff in no time. When a dirt-brained rookie like you wanders in, it's gonna make the whole lot of us look bad.
Clans were composed of several parties groups of hunters who usually stuck together. There were various benefits to forming a clan, sharing information and exchanging items, to name a few, not to mention lending out party members in times of need. Some parties within the same clan would team up to take on particularly dangerous treasure vaults. Those connections were vital to making anyone's hunting career as smooth as possible. That was why the association also recommended parties join or form a clan. Today's recruitment drive, too, was hosted by a clan. The Steps, or more officially First Steps, one of the most renowned clans in the capital city of Zabrudia and benefactor of many up-and-coming parties. Despite their lack of history in the business, their influence was growing by the day. As far as I could tell, every hunter based in the capital knew their name. Ordinarily, parties recruited members on an as-needed basis. However, the Steps hosted a grand recruitment event for all of its parties once a year. Anyone who attended, regardless of their birth, age, or level, was eligible to try out for parties at the event. On the condition that a hunter made a good impression on one, they could be welcomed as the next member of that party. Naturally, parties that belonged to the Steps were of pretty high caliber. Few passed the clan's rigorous scrutiny, but I could see how, to a talented hunter with no connections, the event could look like the chance of a lifetime. Ultimately, though, they would be mistaken. The Steps hired only the creme de la creme of the capital. Just like my friends, the gifts of these clan members went far beyond the realm of mere talent. Most applicants ended up having their inflated self-worth popped to smithereens.
Excuse me, the ad said levels and experience have nothing to do with it, besides some level 3 bozo.
Oh? Did someone tell you you'd be playing with the big boys when you got to level 3? Well, that level, there's run-of-the-mill in the Steps.
He was correct in a sense. Level 3 was only middle of the road. Most well-known parties wouldn't put much stock in the number. On the other hand, Level 3 was only Ruda's current status. 70% of hunters ended their careers at that level, but any hunter with the right ability could climb the ladder higher. If she had made it to Level 3 all by herself, gaining experience in a party would soon take her to new heights. Applicants like Ruda were precisely why the event advertised no level requirement. No matter how talented a hunter you were, you always started at Level 1. I thought the guy's excuse was pretty weak to justify him picking on Ruda, but I kept my mouth shut. This wasn't the time to be saying anything unnecessary. Even as I silently watched Ruda and the guy continued egging each other on as if I weren't even there. That was a good sign. The monstrous man, spitting insults at Ruda, placed his hand on the sword at his waist, a long sword about a meter long. Unlike Ruda's self-defense dagger, his weapon had been crafted to take on monsters and phantoms in treasure vaults. Truth be told, I wouldn't have put my money on Ruda. The big guy was by no means less than Level 3. Even so, she showed no sign of backing down.
You saying you want to go? All right, bring it on.
Her well-shaped lips twisted into a wild grin, mirroring the behemoth before her. She brushed her dagger with her hand. Then suddenly, she drew it in one spectacular motion. Treasure hunters weren't really human anyway. If a hunter got into a fight with a civilian, the hunter would be blamed no matter the circumstances. But when it came to hunter-on-hunter violence, the one who drew their weapon first would come under fire. This was no doubt the reason the guy who was just as riled up as Ruda hadn't drawn his sword before she did. The man was no stranger to a scrap. Now, even if she ended up beaten to a pulp, Ruda would earn no sympathy. The loss spared no mind to disparity. In levels, when it came to spats like this, and here I was minding my own business. How did I get myself into this mess? As I silently cursed the wind, rain, and the commotion unfolding ahead of me, a man in white uniform stepped out of the stone building at the front of the line. The uniform resembled that of an imperial officer, with the exception of a silver-embroidered pair of footsteps on his collar, the insignia of first steps. The man looked just as intimidating as the Goliath facing off against Ruda. Accentuated by the scars on his face, he shot killer glares at both parties before shouting as loud as they were.
Cut it out! Both of you, if you're gonna fight, take it somewhere else. If not, I'll give you the boot before you even step through that door.
Ruda's opponent clicked his tongue and returned his half-drawn sword to its sheath. Ruda followed suit with her dagger, the corner of her mouth twitching, then the line resumed its crawl. The atmosphere inside the building was so heated with excitement, you could almost feel it. A whiff of alcohol lingered in the air of what appeared to be a bar. All of its tables and chairs had been pushed aside, leaving an open space for starry-eyed hunters to line up. Ruda, who had been let in at the same time as me, was gawking with a wide-eyed stare. Apparently, the fight outside was already gone and forgotten.
Wow, they're all hunters?
Several tables were positioned along the walls, with a few white uniformed members of First Steps manning each station. The parties at said stations came in all shapes and sizes, from those composed of several well-known hunters to others notorious solely for their leaders. Some of the parties recruited on the basis of brute strength, while others were on the lookout for a particular skill set. Any hopefuls were to get in a line ready to try out for the party of their choosing. Each party had their own method of recruiting. Of course, those included standard methods like interviews or demonstrations of skill, but I had heard that some parties trusted their gut instincts above all else. I observed the room for a while, but noticed the somewhat bewildered-looking Ruda was still rooted to the spot. I would have ignored her if I didn't feel so bad. First time?
It's not yours?
This is my fifth, I guess.
Fifth! So you had to forget it. I'm sorry.
It's no big deal. I suppose most people here are back for another round. All that mattered in treasure hunting was skill. Those with talent were picked up in no time. But that didn't mean the talentless stood no chance. There had to be others like me in the crowd who'd accepted their incompetence but had shown up here anyway. Hey, perhaps stubbornness was the one talent I did possess. I knew where to start. I stepped away from the crowds to get a better view. By the looks of things, more parties were recruiting than usual. Not all parties partook annually in the recruitment drive, but this time, I could see every one of the noteworthy parties in attendance. That explained the line. As if we hadn't only just met that morning, Ruda stuck tight to my heels.
Hey, Krai, would you mind filling me in a little? I'm not sure where to start.
Sure. I don't mind a good hunter owing me one. Ruda would definitely end up making it past level 3 in her career, unless she wound up dead somewhere. Her expression softened slightly at my comment. I've been in the capital for a long while now, so I know most of the famous hunters. I think you've got a good shot today. First of all, a hunter couldn't just walk up to any random party and expect to get in. Each party operated on a different philosophy and was looking to fill a specific need. While there was some truth to the idea that joining a good party would set you up for life, it wasn't unheard of for newbies to have trouble fitting in. Not only that, but disparity in talent among the party could lead to a terrible heartache. I thought Ruda had potential, but the imperial capital attracted the best hunters from all over. Some of them looked human but were something entirely different beneath the skin, my friends to name a few of them. I don't know what you can or want to do. Judging by your dagger, combat isn't your thing. I looked her up and down, taking note of her gear. Beside her dagger was a leather pack small enough to not inhibit her movement, which I assumed was packed with lockpicks and other tools. Each hunter had their own set of strengths and weaknesses. Typically, solo hunters were recruited as brute force attackers, having already proved their worth of surviving alone against monsters and phantoms. More often than not, these guys had a knack for combat. However, solo hunters more proficient in trapping and enemy detection tended to fall short of formerly partied hunters who had dedicated themselves to that craft, unhindered. Ruda wouldn't find her place as a thief in a party unless she had more to show for her efforts. She no doubt knew this as well, so I wasn't going to reiterate the fact just to get on her bad side. As she waited for me to say something, I pointed to the end of the room. Right off the bat, there's an order to this place. The farther the party is from the entrance, the higher their level. That's the strongest party out of the ones recruiting today. Arc Brave. Have you heard of them? They're the best of the best at the average age of 21. They conquered a level 7 treasure vault, with just the 6 of them. Arc Brave was filled with exceptional freaks even among the hellishly strong hunters infesting the capital. Each and every member possessed a skill set that defied every explanation but divine bestowment, and their leader was known as a hero. Just for reference, the White Wolf's Den that Ruda was hoping to conquer was a level 3 treasure vault. The association could employ more art than science when it came to designating levels, but a level 3 meant they recommended going in with a party of level 3 hunters. A treasure vault only one level higher was said to be 10 times as hard to complete, proving the sheer immeasurable difference between Ruda's skills and those of Arc Brave. If you get into that party, your success is all but guaranteed. If not, just the slightest praise from one of the members would make any of these other groups want to get their hands on you. Even a newbie solo hunter had to have heard of Arc Brave. Ruda seemed a bit intimidated as she whispered,
Just curious, but do you think I have a shot?
"That's up to you. But as far as I know, Arc Brave has never taken on a new member through an event like this. They were one of the biggest names in the capital, the very best or a close second among all young-blooded parties in the city, not to mention that their party's structure was already fully established. I doubted that any applicant lining up at their table expected to actually get in. They were there only to network, or even just to meet the Braves in person." Ruda watched the crowd and let out a long sigh. As soon as she had heard about the level 7 treasure vault, she'd seen her limit. I continued gesturing around the room, naming and explaining each party to her. As I did so, I spotted a few fresh faces to the event. It seemed most of the clan were in attendance. Most of the names I dropped would be familiar to anyone who'd been on the job in the capital for a few months. The information wasn't that hard to sniff out. Ruda just happened to be a newbie who went hunting solo. Besides, not even I knew every party in the steps. Once I'd completed my full rundown of the room, Ruda looked at me wearily.
You sure know a lot about them, don't you, Krai? I'm getting tired just listening.
It's nothing.
I don't mean to pry, but where are you looking to end up?
Nowhere in particular. I'm pretty much useless. I had no forte. Forget about jacks of all trades. I was the master of none. That was me. I had neither courage nor strength. The faint flicker of passion I'd had back when I still believed in myself had long since been extinguished. Needless to say, hunting was dangerous work. 70% of hunters met their ends in treasure vaults. A guy like me wasn't made for that kind of risk. I'd use my talent as an excuse and all, but maybe my guts were the real problem. I was gonna barf.
Is that so? Then, if you don't mind, how about forming a party with me?
I think she meant it. My heart constricted, and I struggled to breathe. Ruda was a good egg among the sea of thugs that called themselves hunters. She hadn't offered half-heartedly nor in jest. For me, though, just the thought of weighing her down was painful. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm beyond pity. You should join a party that's a good match for you for the sake of your career."
Oh, okay, I guess.
I reached for the silver chain that hung from my belt. The cool sensation steadied my heartbeat a bit. As if to clear the air, Ruda changed the subject.
Hey, I wonder why they let that table out.
She pointed dramatically at a large, uninhabited table behind Arc Braves.
You two really ain't got a clue, do you?
The big guy from before came stomping over with a sardonic grin. His face had reddened, perhaps from the heat, his massive biceps and savage leather armor looking even more menacing in the light. His mood seemed to have improved from before. Maybe he'd had some success. Ruda scowled at him.
What do you want? They're gonna haul you over the coals.
Lighten up, kiddo. Your big shot hunting mentor, the great Greg, is just trying to give you some friendly advice.
The Great Greg? Hadn't heard of him. Of course, I only knew the very top % of hunters that anyone acquainted with the industry would know. There were plenty of tough guys I didn't know, so maybe the big guy was still making his mark.
That table's for the party that started up first steps along with Arc Brave. Looks like they blew us off again.
The party that founded the clan?
The Great Greg leaned closer, whispering as if imparting classified information.
The Steps have been running this gig for years now, but the turnout from their end's bigger than usual today. There's the Braves, who just beat a level 7 Vault without losing a member, the Crossers and Starlights, who don't usually recruit, and then there's those guys over by themselves all decked out with the mark of the Steps.
The great Greg gestured towards the edge of the room with his eyes, indicating a disgruntled-looking hunter leaning with his arms crossed against the wall. The hunter, like others in the room, wasn't wearing the same uniform as the clan members recruiting, but even so, his collar and sleeves were adorned with pins and cuffs depicting silver footsteps. Clan members were mandated to make their insignia visible.
Why'd you think those Steps hunters showed up when they're not even recruiting? There's got to be a reason.
The great Greg had done his research, but I knew a little more than he did. Those guys are solo hunters within the Steps.
Solo hunters can join a clan?
I nodded. Parties can be as small as you want. Since only parties can join a clan, a solo hunter can sign up as a party to get in. You'd have to be a pretty capable hunter, though. That, or they were just like Ruda, who happened to have a little luck and talent and had reaped the rewards for their risky choices. I turned away from the guy leaning on the wall and pointed at a girl who was aimlessly wandering about the empty table. She had short black hair and wore a black leather combat suit and a dagger on her belt, a skin-tight getup optimized for mobility. She was perhaps a little younger than Ruda. That's Tino Shade. She's a level 4 solo member of the Steps, pretty famous.
That little girl?
I wouldn't say that if I were you. Don't let her age and appearance fool you into thinking she isn't as hot-headed as any other bruiser here. Tino was a thief, just like Ruda, sign of what Ruda could become. She, another freak that belonged to First Steps, could sweep through the White Wolf's den on her own. For the first time, the great Greg turned his attention to me, with an air of interest, in fact.
You don't look like much of a hunter, but you sure know your stuff.
Reconnaissance is key. Besides, she's actually the apprentice of someone I know. I tugged on my hood down further. To be more specific, Tina was the apprentice to a friend of mine. In other words, my friend was even more of a freak than this freak. What a development.
Someone you know?
I don't know why she's here, though. Tina worked alone. Perhaps she'd gotten tired of it all and was here to finally join a party. It was pretty normal for parties to recruit from within their own clans. Of course, there were better ways to get internally hired than coming to an event like this. The great Greg crossed his arms and laughed haughtily.
That's the stuff I'm talking about. There's a rumor going around one of the original Steps parties that hasn't recruited in years will be here. Grieving Souls.
My whole body shook. It felt as though I were standing alone on the precipice of an endless void. Oblivious to my condition, the great Greg cracked a grin.
The Grievers run a tight ship, and a small one at that. You'd never catch a glimpse of them outside of an event like this, let alone get a chance at joining their party. Those guys over there are dying to make themselves known to them.
Ruda looked on with astonishment. The Grievers. My stomach churned whenever I heard that name. That was the nickname my friends and I had assigned to our party a few years back when we'd moved from the countryside to the capital. The young-blooded party of 5 freaks rose up the ranks in no time. A party strong enough to rival Arcbrave. The party's official name, however, was Grieving Souls. Before I knew it, I was parched. Cold sweat trickled down my back. I felt the urge to beg the great Greg to not say that name, but that would have been too suspicious. I tugged on my hood, desperate to hide every last part of myself.
What's wrong? Are you feeling okay?
As I sunk deeper inside, shivering, I was gonna barf.
Well, looks like the rumors were garbage. With all the rigmarole, I thought maybe there'd be something to it.
The great Greg shrugged, unconcerned with the outcome. All parties in the Steps were high level, not just Arcbrave and Grieving Souls. Even the short-tempered great Greg wasn't going to complain that one party didn't show. The same couldn't be said, however, for the rest of the hunters in the room.
Hey, what's going on here? Where are the Grievers?
Numerous eyes shot towards the source of the voice. A boy with scorching red hair and a great sword on his back, too big for the average human to carry. Despite his short stature, his well-built muscles were evident through his clothes. Not to repeat myself, but the shortness of a hunter's fuse correlated with their strength in combat. This kid sure had guts to say what no one, not even the great Greg, dared to say. I saw in his eyes that he knew he could take on everyone in the room. He probably earned that confidence too. The great sword on his back had a distinctive glow signifying that it hadn't been made by human hands. No doubt it was something he'd acquired from a treasure vault. A relic, if I'd ever seen one. While he was clearly younger than me, the aura about him kept me from chalking him up as a reckless idiot. The boy continued shouting, uncaring of anyone's approval.
All you flunkies can get bent. I came all this way to see the guys at the top.
The great Greg watched him curiously.
Young blood, don't tell me he's looking to make enemies of everyone here.
The great Greg might have looked like a brute, but with his age came some rationality. Treasure hunters needed allies. News traveled fast of those stirring the pot. No matter how good of a hunter you were, a bad rep would be a real setback. The boy had probably gotten away with it up till this point, but he was now standing in a room full of capable fighters who all felt at least somewhat positively about the steps, many of whom carrying relics of their own. For the time being, the room allowed the boy to continue his tantrum, perhaps because he spoke for a certain fraction of the hunters here. Those who didn't share his sentiment watched with pitying amusement. The boy was now going from table to table, glaring at the party members with looks that could kill. Ultimately, though, almost no one was taking him seriously. No one handled rabid miscreants better than seasoned hunters. Close to spitting fire, the boy raged like a beast trying to intimidate its pack.
I'm going to be the strongest hunter in the world someday. I'm already at level 4. I was going to give this strongest party in the capital a chance to join me, but not anymore.
He could talk the talk, all right. This kid was going places or dying young, one or the other. By the looks of him, he had to still be in his teens, which made reaching level 4 quite the achievement. His sky-high cockiness and brazen arrogance weren't so admirable of traits, but that didn't matter one bit if he could keep winning fights. After all, that was what being a hunter was all about. Ruda's cheeks were twitching, showing her apparent devastation that this moron was at a higher level. That wasn't all bad news, though. There was still the possibility that he'd leveled up through working with a party. As the boy stomped about, a member of the clan finally stepped up. It wasn't any of the members who were recruiting, but Tino Shade, who, until now, had been standing alone in a corner of the room. She casually strolled up next to the boy, shooting him a look that would send shivers down anyone's spine.
Huh? What do you want?
Oh, all bark. No bite. We don't want you.
Uh-oh. Her icy tone told me she was totally pissed. I could hardly blame her when Grieving Souls was her mentor's party. The other Steps members who had brushed off the boy's attitude before now came rushing in.
Yo, Tino, we're here to recruit. Remember, let's not cause a scene or you'll ruin this for the rest of us.
I'll take him out in no time. That's what Lizzie would do. I'm the one who'll join the Grieving Souls. She promised I could once I'm strong enough.
Tino was within arm's reach of the boy with the mighty greatsword. Her temper was just as short as the boy's. As she got ready to pounce, more clan members flocked to talk her down. It was getting hard to tell which of the pair was causing more trouble.
Ignore that idiot. He's a waste of time. We have orders to keep things civil, remember? You're gonna get us all in trouble.
Huh! Who are you calling an idiot? I'll kill you.
You idiot! Drop dead! Already! We're trying to work!
Now even these clan members were responding in kind. High-level clan or not, hunters were all the same. These freaks drooled for any chance to show their power. Like adding fuel to the fire, the commotion grew rapidly. Thankfully, there was no furniture close at hand, but I expected them to draw their weapons any second. Once they did, there would be no stopping the scrap until one of them died, or felt better. A treasure hunter brawl was nothing short of a calamity. At least everyone in the building now was a hunter, so I wouldn't have to worry about civilian casualties. That is, until relics came into play. Those could easily blow the roof off of a building or two.
Yeah, show him what for.
It jeered, triggering many around him to join in. Some of them, much to my dismay, were members of First Steps. De-escalation was off the table. I tugged Ruda's sleeve as she stood there dumbfounded, before whispering to her, "Ruda, let's give up for today and get out of here. Once this lot starts, there's no stopping them. You'll die if you get caught in the mix." Hunters weren't ones for turning the other cheek. Once attacked, they hit back harder. It was a terrible cycle that could be triggered with so much as one stray arrow, meaning the brawl wouldn't die out until only one last man was standing. Tino shrugged, tapping the toe of her boot on the ground. I recognized that tick she was about to kick the boy's head off. A well-trained hunter could kick a crater into the ground or blast through a wall. Phantoms impervious to heavy artillery would be taken down by a single kick.
What? Wait!
Look, the only thing I've got going for me is my sense of danger. We've got to leave before the fight breaks out.
But I came here to join a party.
That ship had sailed. Everyone here was a meathead. You couldn't join a party if you were dead. I'd survived the past 5 years thinking like this. Ruda had no idea how high-level hunters fought. I knew I shouldn't have come here. As a wave of regret washed over me, I almost let out a sob. Fine, I'll help you find a party, but next time, okay? Now's the time to be staying alive.
Okay, I get it.
The already hot air in the building was ready to boil us alive. Hotter still was the greatsword the boy had drawn, which was quite literally on fire. Relics like this one all had their own unique abilities. The crimson flame roared along the blade without dying out or spreading, illuminating Tino's steely expression. Avoiding all eyes, Ruda and I began crawling towards the exit. I felt pitiful at that moment, but, more importantly, safe. I couldn't say the same for all those taking part in the disturbing exchange behind me.
Kill first, think later. Lizzie taught me that.
You asked for it, girlie. Bring it on, but don't think I'll go easy on you.
Who do you think you're messing with, huh? Let's take this outside, now!
If they were to fight in public, the knights on patrol would find out in no time. The people out there were sensitive enough to hunter scandals as it was. If a civilian were caught in the crossfire, this pair would be neck-deep in trouble. More voices egged them on, which I dreaded to think belonged to the steps. The whole place was in total chaos.
Have at him. Fight. Don't encourage them.
A scream. Crude whistling and jeers. The utter turmoil. As we sneaked away towards the exit, someone finally cued Tino and the boy into a brawl. I shuffled my knees as fast as they could, crawling away through the pain. Just before I reached the exit, just when I thought I'd make it out of the danger zone alive, a blast of wind swept through the room. The hot air instantly dissipated, and I was thrown back onto my rear end by the gust. My hood slid off. Ruda, who was following behind me, let out a short yelp. A shadow was looming over me. My heart was pounding in my ears. Terrified, I lifted my head.
When did you?
Eyes as clear as black diamonds stared silently down at me. They belonged to Tino, who should have been facing off against the loudmouth boy. Her neatly trimmed hair swished as she came to a stop with her smooth bare legs poised before me. Her expression was no longer icy, but puzzled.
Can I help you?
Tino didn't answer, but spoke with an equally shaky voice.
What are you doing, Master? How long have you been here?
Ugh, I was gonna barf. Let's think back to when our dream began. Having come of age at 15, the 6 of us teamed up as planned and tested our mettle by tackling a level 1 treasure vault. Treasure vaults came in all shapes and sizes, ranked based on the location, difficulty of their traps, dangers, and available relics. Level 1 vaults were the easiest of the bunch, a favorite among rookie hunters. They proved no match for us, hunters of endless dedication and years of rigorous training. We had shot through our first treasure vault faster than any rookie party in history. But while our future as treasure hunters was becoming more concrete, I couldn't deny my skills were lagging behind those of my friends. Truth be told, I'd always had an inkling throughout our training, but the realization came as a slap to the face when I was confronted with a real-life treasure vault. In fact, I felt as though I'd tripped and were falling into an endless pit. Although the difference in our capabilities was no big deal at the time, I knew that in a few years I wouldn't be able to keep up with their hunts. Amid my genius friends, I alone had as much talent as the average treasure hunter, and even that was giving myself too much credit. I was the poster child of dead weight. At the same time, I also realized how far we were from equal. I might have been the same age and grown up in the same environment as my friends, but I was a drop of rain in a torrent of storms. Every one of my friends had a lot more mana than I had, was much stronger than I was, or possessed some other great talent. Even my sister had a knack for magic when I had no knack at all. That we weren't siblings by blood didn't really matter. That disparity hurt the most. The 6 of us had been friends for as long as I could remember. Even before hunting became our dream, we had always stuck together. We had our fair share of disagreements and fights, but we got along as well as any other friends. The town we'd grown up in was small enough that we felt pretty much like family. Seeing as I, the weakest of the bunch, could see the stark difference in our skill and growth, no doubt everyone else saw it as well. The fact that they hadn't mentioned it all those years was a testament to their kindness. The night after we'd completed our first vault, we stayed at an inn for the first time, and I didn't get a wink of sleep. Tears staining my pillow, I grappled all night long with the decision until I made up my mind. I would give it all up. Treasure vaults were wrought with wealth and danger. Just as mana material, the building blocks of treasure vaults generated relics. They created living phantoms as adversaries to hunters who dared enter. I feared that if I had stayed in the party, I would one day put all my friends in danger. If they would just leave me behind in the face of the inevitable, I wouldn't have had a problem other than with me dying, of course, but I knew they would never do that. Besides, I didn't want to die. Giving up on my lifelong dream was a bummer, but it sure beat endangering my friends. That said, my adventure would end with clearing a treasure vault for rookies, which would be a funny story in and of itself. I could look forward to my friends becoming hotshot hunters so that I could brag about once belonging to their party. The next day, I gathered my friends together in the inn and explained to them why I was giving up on my dream. I'm pretty sure my eyes were tear-free after I'd cried them all out during the night. Luke Sequel, the friend who'd inspired our journey all those years ago, who would later become an apprentice to the Sword Saint and be widely known for his versatile swordsmanship, spoke with just as much gravitas as I had.
You weren't the only one thinking last night. Krai, since you don't really have a role, you should be our leader.
Did you hear a word I just said? That had been the beginning and the end of me. My friends' talents bloomed far more quickly and explosively than I had even anticipated, allowing them to conquer vault after vault of rapidly ascending levels. After just a year, I could no longer keep up with them, but I remained their leader for one simple reason. Simply put, these guys were idiots. Even so, they were the most powerful idiots in the world. My passion for hunting was soon seized by an all-consuming fear of death, a fear that I couldn't overcome. I wanted to quit hunting then and there, not out of humility, but out of pure dread. Nonetheless, I remained their leader. And now, several years later, I was still the leader of this ever-rising, ever-growing band of freaks. This guy's a griever? I don't see it. He's too busy mopping the floor with his own ass. Where was he when we had ourselves a fight? He was behind me in the line outside. People were talking about me. I had it coming. If I were in their shoes, I would have done the same thing. Sprawled out on the table assigned to Grieving Souls, I let my gaze wander. The other members in the party rarely showed up to these events, so I had the table all to myself. Currently, they were out of town, taking on a treasure vault beyond the capital. Honestly, though, even if they had been here, I would never have brought them to this. All eyes in the room were on me, but no one dared approach. What did I do to deserve this? I thought. I just overslept a little. I'd done my part, so I was trying to get out of here. What was the point of me being here at all? So this is solitude. My stomach was in knots. No doubt about it, I was by far the most fragile hunter in the room. I hadn't been trying to get away from the fight as a gag or out of pure laziness. I'd been genuinely terrified. I wondered how all these people eyeing me would react if they discovered I wasn't just a member of the Grievers, but their leader. Tino, the one who dragged me to the table, puffed out her cheeks while shooting daggers at any gossipers.
Don't worry, Master. I know how amazing you are.
Because of you, I'm suffering a great deal of psychological anguish. Tino Shade was apprenticed to one of my childhood friends, Liz Smart, the stifled shadow, a genocidal freak who killed first and asked questions later. We'd met Tino back when we had first arrived in the capital, and she'd been under Liz's wing ever since. Even when I, Arc Brave, and a few other parties had founded First Steps, Tino hadn't been far behind. Tino loved Liz like a sister, calling her Lizzie for short, and even looked up to me as a leader. By now, she was practically the mascot of Grieving Souls, even though she grew as quickly as the rest of the group. Incidentally, her justification for calling me Master was that I was the leader of Grieving Souls and Clan Master of First Steps. In other words, I was the ringleader of the freak show. When we first set up the clan, I had nodded along to this and that, and found myself stuck with the role. Just thinking back on it made me want to barf. Why are you here? Don't you have a hunt to go on? Tino clutched one of her elbows and shrank down with a puppy-like gaze. Her entreating demeanor and short temper were byproducts courtesy of her mentor's teachings.
But I heard that Grieving Souls was looking for new members today.
I didn't say that. I just said I'd stop by. Even then, that was only because the Vice Clan Master had scolded me for never showing up to the event of my own conception. I had observed the goings-on every time, but that was always when disguised as an applicant. That aside, it wasn't right to put stock in a hazy rumor like that. I'd never understand hunters, but if that was all it took for more applicants to show up, I'd make sure to spread rumors next time. Grieving Souls aside, there were plenty of parties looking for promising new members. Not that I'd show up next time or ever again after today. Couldn't everyone just behave themselves? As I chatted with Tino, taking full advantage of the room being stunned by my dramatic entrance, a frustratingly good-looking guy approached me from the next table over. The crowd that had formed a respectful distance away from us parted to clear a path. This man, with his silky blonde locks and friendly blue eyes, looked better than anyone else in the Steppes white uniform, which paid homage to that of the Imperial Army. Born and raised in the Empire, he was now one of the strongest hunters in it, one of only 5 level 7 hunters in the vicinity. He was the paragon of our kind, a hero, and the leader of Arc Brave. Yes, the man standing before us was none other than Argent Thunderstorm. What a douche. This guy just so happened to be the rival of my childhood friends. He hung around in a party composed of himself and a bunch of cute girls. What made him really get on my nerves was that not only was he unbelievably strong, he was actually a humble and genuinely nice guy. Just thinking about how shallow I was to find him so insufferable only served to grind my gears even further. It was a truly terrible cycle.
Yo, Krai! What took you so long?
Nothing. I overslept. Ark let out a hearty laugh.
Ha! Your jokes always crack me up.
That wasn't a joke.
Stay away from Master Philanderer.
Ark laughed even harder, slapping the table with his palm. What a scary guy. We may have been among friends and all, but Tino needed to stop biting people's heads off. We should have trained her better. I turned to the friendly chick magnet and answered him with a little bravado. I was too excited, so I couldn't get to sleep. I wasn't lying about the sleep, at least. I'd been so anxious last night, I hadn't caught a wink until dawn. If I weren't also so afraid of the Vice Clan Master, I never would have shown myself in front of so many short-fused freaks in the first place. As it was, though, strength was the only status that mattered in the world of hunters, putting me squarely on the bottom of the totem pole.
I see. You disguised yourself as an applicant so you could take a better look from the shadows. But that's not really fair, is it? The rules say we've got to wear our uniforms, but you're not even our insignia.
I overslept. Open your ear holes. I hadn't had time to get ready. Ark squinted, looking me up and down. As gorgeous and genius as he was still a hunter. That meant from time to time he didn't listen to others. In fact, hunters usually didn't listen at all. I wasn't taking a better look at anybody. I had no hand in the recruitment of other parties, and our party wasn't looking for anyone new. My appearance today was just supposed to be for show.
Master, he's too rude. Let's kick him out of the clan.
Ark guffawed.
You're so funny, Tino. I love it.
If only everyone were as forgiving as you, Ark. If the great Greg or the boy who'd picked a fight with Tino had been in Ark's shoes, at least 3 brawls would have broken out already. Ark was currently trying to pet Tino's head as she all but growled at him and dodged his hand. He had some nerve trying to tame that little freak. He could pet all he wanted, but this one would bite. I rarely went out in public for fear of being spotted. I wore a disguise when I did, so Ark had to be the most recognizable hunter from our clan here. A number of hunters in the room, some in our clan and some not, were watching us closely without approaching, possibly because they didn't want to interrupt Ark. It would be pretty great if he stuck around with me until the event was completely over. Did you find any gems? Which drew even more eyes to Ark. Arc Brave was still in the process of evaluating prospective hunters. If Ark named a single one of the hopefuls, they'd be in their party in a heartbeat. Even if Ark didn't go that far, his word alone would get them into anywhere they wanted. Ark furrowed his brow for some time before shaking his head.
Not yet, to be honest. I've seen a few with potential, but if you were to ask me if they could carry their own weight in the kind of treasure vaults we'd be taking on...
I should have known. Freaks were wrought among kindred flames. With Hunter's strength correlating to past experience in vaults, finding a new member that could jump straight into Arc Brave off the bat was no easy feat. If there were such a hunter, they would have made a name for themselves already. This recruiting event was better designed for finding diamonds in the rough. I felt bad for the applicants being toyed with by the party's impossibly high standards. A light flickered in Ark's eyes as he calmly asked,
How about you, Krai?
How am I supposed to know? I'm not even looking. So I took a look around the room. Every hunter whose eyes I met contorted their face into an awkward smile. My gaze met Ruda's as she stood awkwardly by a wall. Beside her, the great Greg looked at me with wide eyes. The feisty red-headed boy who was being held back by a pair of steppes hunters bared his teeth at me. I glanced at Tino and her shoulders twitched. It was the kind of attention that made me want to barf. We're all set right now, but if someone caught my eye, would you take them? Ark closed his eyes and pondered for a moment.
All right. I'll take your word for it, Krai.
The entire room burst into hurried whispers. No sane hunter would let an outsider decide who to take into their party, let alone into the most promising pack of youngsters in the capital.
What the hell, Ark?
I sat up straight, crossing my arms and legs in an overly exaggerated manner.
Oh, yeah. Anything goes.
Ark swallowed.
Just one, if you will. We can't afford to train too many rookies at once.
His generosity knew no bounds. Just one, huh? That's an interesting thought. Good going, Ark. It could work out. It would certainly stir up some buzz, and if word spread, the next recruitment drive would be an even bigger hit. I'd have to rent a larger room. The only problem was that I myself had no eye for scouting talent. So far, I had only come across a piece of trash that had a little potential, a funny piece of trash with decent experience, and a fairly strong but reckless piece of trash. They were a far cry from the kind of talent I would recommend to Ark Brave, and I had no clue as to their hidden potential. Ark had given me a free pass, but if I didn't take this seriously, tension would linger between us. The easy way out was to recommend a solo hunter from within the clan, since the status guaranteed a high floor of talent. My eyes met Tino's. She blushed.
I'm flattered, Master. It really is an honor, but my heart belongs to your party. I can't join the party of that poser. Please recommend your second choice.
I really ought to check up on what nonsense Liz has been feeding you. My friends were long-standing rivals to Ark Brave. Unlike the Braves, though, Grievers were petty. Ark was definitely no fake, by the way. He was handsome to his very core. I scanned the room for a while, checking out the potentials to no avail. It'd be a shame to retract the cool line I'd pulled off, but I considered telling Ark I'd had no luck after all. That said, seeing the freaks in the room look to me with bated breath, I couldn't help but want to keep the charade going. I might have lost my drive as a treasure hunter, but that didn't mean I couldn't play the badass clan leader. I pinched my brows together, putting on my best contemplative expression. Let me see then. I do have one in mind to pick up as a griever when the time is right. Hey! Yelled a hostile voice from across the room. The hot-blooded kid from earlier had escaped the hold of the hunters and was standing dramatically pointing his finger at me. He was a level 4 hunter after all. He'd be quite the match for most here.
Get on your knees and beg me, you schmucks. Then maybe I'll consider that lousy party of yours.
This kid sure wasn't shy. Don't you already have a party?
What's it to you?
Well, kid, it has to do with recruiting you. I put a hand on my chin and examined the boy. He seemed talented, all right, and he had the guts. Manners could be taught if Ark were there to crack the whip. Having a strong arm in a specific field meant that he had potential. He'd get himself killed in a clash against the other grievers, but I couldn't care less how much headache he'd cause Ark. I clapped my hands loudly and smiled at the boy. What's your name, kid?
It's Gilbert Bush. Gilbert of the Purgatorial Sword.
The Purgatorial Sword must have been the great sword relic on his back, since only a handful of hunters in the capital had earned a proper title. Ark sized up Gilbert carefully. I doubted even his keen eye saw anything other than a twerp. I clapped my hands again, ready to speak. Very well, Gilbert. You have my recommendation, under one condition.
What condition?
I had no eye for talent. Ruda looked like a piece of trash with a little potential, the great Greg like a funny piece of trash, and Gilbert a reckless piece of trash. But who knew if they really were trash? Since I was no expert, it would come down to pure chance, so it didn't really matter who I picked. You heard me. My condition is, don't lose. Winning's the most important quality of a hunter. Wouldn't you agree? Gilbert, no. The whole clan, in fact, was hanging on my every word, all of which was complete bogus. Ugh, my stomach was acting up again. If you're not strong enough to win, you'll put your party in jeopardy, so show me that you won't lose. Oh, and just so you know, since becoming a hunter, I've never lost a single fight.
What?
Of course I'd never lost a fight. I'd never even fought to begin with. I'd used every tactic at my disposal to flee from any and all conflict, from calling upon the perks of my position to using my friends as shields. Today's challenge would be no exception. I plucked a gold ring off my left pinky and tossed it to Gilbert. It was a shooting ring, a common piece, but a relic nonetheless. Though it was hardly the most powerful of relics, it still fetched a hefty price. With a beaming smile, I declared, "Attention, all hunters. As it stands, I will recommend this kid here to arc brave, that is. Unless someone takes the ring, if you procure the ring, the recommendation is yours. While it's not worth much, it is a relic. Even if you don't want my recommendation, you can keep the ring. Arc whistled, wide-eyed. Tino caught on to the challenge immediately. She closed the distance between her and Gilbert and kicked him square in the face. I stood up quietly, a smile on my face, ready to slip away without anyone noticing. Time to run. This is a story of heroes, a tale of the golden age of treasure hunters, when people strove for power, fame, fortune, and glory. This is the story of friends who shone like stars, of clan members who shared a common goal, and of a grieving soul, both in the midst of it all and who watched it all from the sidelines. Chapter 1: Dealing with Slave Labor. I can't do this anymore. I'm not good enough. There I was, pleading with my fellow grieving souls, my childhood friends. 1 year had passed since we'd started hunting, no time at all in the grand scheme of things, but that 1 year had been filled with trials and tribulations for me. Treasure vaults, overflowing with mana material, were packed to the brim with phantoms born of the stuff. Dangers like these lurked around every corner, along with vicious monsters on the prowl for power and countless traps ready to swing shot on your life. Not even fellow treasure hunters there could be trusted. I'd heard it all before, having read heaps of tales on the great hunters of the past, so I had thought I knew all there was to know. That half-baked resolution of mine had been shattered with ease once I became a hunter. I lost count of how many times I had nearly barfed myself blue in the face. This life of day in, day out life-or-death adventures had worn me down to the bone. I can't keep up with you guys anymore. There's no way you don't know this by now, but I'm the one holding us back from this gig. Every member of a treasure hunting party had an important role to play. Offensive types, for example swordsmen and magi, were tasked with dispatching incoming monsters. Those in supporting roles, such as thieves and alchemists, disarmed traps and scouted for enemies. And healers, more often than not paladins and clerics, treated injuries and defended the party from harm. As someone with none of these skill sets, I was nothing but a burden. I had tried. I, in the search for something I could actually do, had knocked on the doors of many a mentor. But at the end of the day, when someone without talent puts in the same effort as someone with it, the latter will always take the lead. And all of my friends, Luke and the rest of them, sure put in the work. They worked their butts off. As long as there were only 24 hours in the day, I would never catch up to them. A conventional party consisted of 5 or 6 members. If they would just replace me taking another hunter or two that matched up to their skills in my place, they would make much better progress. Luke Sickle nodded sullenly.
I get it, Krai. We're weak.
Excuse me?
Sorry, Krai. You wouldn't have had to worry about us if we were stronger.
That's not what I mean. They were strong. Too strong, even. Enough to keep beating vault after vault of increasingly higher levels while lugging around this Krai Andrey dead weight. Taking on vaults with just the 5 of them would have been much easier for them. Luke stared off into the distance, my desperate pleading falling on deaf ears.
What are we doing? If we slow down now, becoming the best will just be a pipe dream. Thanks for the wake-up call, Krai. I'm gonna go train under this sword saint or whoever and hone my skills from scratch.
As if merely going on an afternoon stroll, Luke sauntered off to seek mentorship from the sword saint renowned throughout the capital. The others two piped up with ideas on how to improve their own skills. It was then that I realized these guys were hopeless. Every one of them thought getting stronger was the ticket to solving any problem. Somehow, they just couldn't grasp the fact that no matter how hard they trained, I'd still be mincemeat. And so, I scrambled to find any way out of these adventures and came up with the perfect ploy. I'd establish a clan. If I kept following this lot into harm's way, I would meet my end in no time, or at least have a big chunk taken out of me. Instead, I'd start a clan, roping in other up-and-coming parties to scout out a new griever or two any onion who could keep up with those freaks. That was how I ended up founding First Steps, dodging a treasure hunting bullet or two with the pretext of managing the clan. It had been a whole 3 years since then. Let's talk mana material. I was no expert on the matter, but I was aware that the substance coursed through every fiber of our world. Imagine an invisible cloud of fog that pervaded everything. Occasionally, dense concentrations of it could form due to the influence of ley lines and other factors. When it did, it manifested confined, alternate dimensions based on information extracted from the history of the world. Those were treasure vaults. The reason treasure hunting had been a career since days of yore. Treasure vaults came in all shapes and sizes, manifested from any history imaginable, from lost civilizations to rare natural phenomena. The forms of the vaults themselves, while following certain patterns, materialized in near infinite variety, taking the shape of towers, castles, forests, deserts, underground dungeons, or even more peculiar forms such as ships, waterfalls, or skies. The reason treasure hunters delve into these vaults was for the treasures within, unique items called relics that materialized along with them. They could take the form of anything. May that be a canteen that never ran dry, a ring that protected its wearer from a single fatal blow, or a coat that allowed its wearer to fly, to name a few. Many of these items could not be recreated with modern technology, perhaps an expression of humanity's imagination or a product long lost from the memory of human civilizations. Depending on the power, just one of these bona fide treasures could fetch such a high enough price to allow a hunter to live out the rest of their lives in luxury. Of course, there were risks involved. There were monsters, powerful beings that dwelled in concentrations of mana material, as well as phantoms, apparitions that came to be in the same manner as the vaults themselves. Then there were the countless traps and the challenges of the terrain itself. Even altercations between agitated hunters could lead to instant death. Despite facing these life-threatening dangers, hunters continued to yearn for the promises treasure vaults held. Fame, fortune, and the power a hunter obtained by taking in the high-density mana material were all too tempting for them to give up. And there was no better location for a hunter to set themselves up in than the imperial capital of Zibrudia. The city was host to convenient public transport and advanced amenities, as well as unrivaled security provided by the strength of the empire. To top it all off, numerous underground ley lines, the pathways of mana material, generated treasure vaults of varying difficulty in the vicinity, making Zibrudia a holy land for treasure hunters. The vast array of relics and monster parts, brought back by hunters, drew in merchants from all over, their trades attracting even more hunters to the city. The more famous hunters congregated here, the safer the city grew. This cycle of prosperity allowed the Zibrudian Empire unparalleled strength among the most powerful nations of the world. Once we, a group of kids from a remote hometown, had vowed to become treasure hunters, we'd taken carriage after carriage to make the tough journey to the distant capital. We'd been sure that its environment would test us and provide us with a shortcut to glory. In fact, my friends had become a little too refined by the experience, but even so, I still stood by our decision. The Zibrudian Empire prospered because of treasure hunters, resulting in its laws favoring them in both amenities and taxes. The headquarters of First Steps clan stood in a prime location, overlooking one of the main streets of the capital. Clan headquarters were otherwise known as clan houses, but the Steps clan house was a 5-story monster of a structure, having been funded by the exorbitant members' fee. At that very moment, I was dozing off within the clan master's office on the top floor of said structure, basking in the sunlight pouring in from the wide windows, when Ava, the vice clan master, came bursting through the door. Running a clan was far from easy. It required an entirely different skill set than that required for treasure hunting. Many clans were run by their clan master alone, but the Steps hired staff to lighten the load. The vice clan master Eva Renfide was one such staff member, along with 9 other non-hunter employees under her. Eva walked in with her slender, unmonstrous limbs, her amethyst eyes shining behind her red-framed glasses, her brown hair neatly tucked away. On sight alone, you could tell that she could get the job done. In fact, the clan would have crumbled to the ground without her. She was one of the many important backbones I'd recruited into the Steps, whose assignment to her post was due in no small part to the fact that I wouldn't die if she took a swing at me. Eva saw me jolt into consciousness and let out a deep sigh.
We're on the front page, Krai.
Seriously? Visibly disgruntled, Eva took the newspaper from under her arm and laid it flat on the desk. It was the latest issue of Zibrudia Times, the top-selling paper in the Empire. The front page featured a photo of the bar we'd rented for our recruitment drive the previous day, except its sign had fallen to the ground. A hole had been blown through one wall, and several sections were ablaze. Through the freshly hammered opening in the wall, you could see a hot mess of the hunters brawling. Brawl busts out as Big Shot Braves recruit. Or so the headline went. No doubt they'd got the wrong end of the stick, but I was too busy trying not to barf to point that out. I feigned a big yawn as I skimmed through the article for the one thing I had to be sure of. Any civilian casualties?
Fortunately, no.
Then we're in the clear. No harm, no foul. A top-tier hunter could kill a normie with the flick of a finger. Good thing I tipped the owner off to leave beforehand. Only hunters got caught in the mix. Our clan's motto was no harming the normies. Destroyed buildings could be rebuilt, but not even the best clerics in the Empire could raise the dead. I continued poring over the article, noting with relief that there was no mention of Grieving Souls. We had somewhat of a rapport with the Times thanks to all of the crazy stunts my fellow grievers had pulled in the past. Thankfully, they often let us off lightly. But these freaks, members of the clan or hopefuls, sure didn't know how to pull punches. Even I hadn't expected them to dive headfirst into such a bombshell of a brawl over such a low-rank relic. Why'd they have to go and wreck the building? Eva, unaware of the details, glared at me through her glasses.
I was told you added fuel to the fire.
Well, that wasn't my intention. It was already an inferno in there, just for the record. As far as I knew, the recruitment event had given way to the chaos, but that's meatheads for you. I hadn't caught the outcome of the event because I'd got out of there as soon as the table started flying. Heck, Lil Gilbert had been taken out right off the bat by Tino. All hunters were extremely volatile. A little bit of heat was all it took for them to blow sky high. Geez, let me move away from all this. How's Ark taking it?
I just saw him in the lounge, chortling at the front page. I don't think he's heartbroken.
That guy could really roll with the punches. He wasn't even bothered by such a blatant dig. That was the mark of a true hero. At the end of the day, there was more to it than brute strength. I was grateful Ark Brave was our second fiddle. On numerous occasions, they'd saved our collective butts. Anyway, Ark's reaction settled it. We'd be fine. I tossed the paper aside and kicked my feet up on the table, letting the silver chain I'd left atop it clink. All set. I began polishing my signature rings as Eva held her temples in frustration.
What about compensation for the bar?
Bill Ark for it. Don't forget to account for any lost revenue. That was the deal when we rented the place.
The association also has a thing or two to say.
Handle it, however. By now, I was accustomed to the association's reprimands. I used to barf in my mouth at every word they sent, but with members like these, the complaints were year-round. For the sake of my digestive health, I couldn't afford to barf every time we got one. Keeping up the cool bravado, I kept at my rings as Eva kept at me.
They want you to get over there and explain yourself, and quote-unquote, to get off your lazy ass.
Oh, joy. Being called up makes me really want to barf. The capital was a city of treasure hunters. Therefore, the largest organization that managed hunters, the Explorers Association, held great power here. Like most clans, First Steps was a member of the association, so there was no getting out of a summons. Eva sighed at my callous honesty.
You should be used to it by now. How many times has it been?
This is one thing I'll never get used to. Branch Manager Gark scares the crap out of me. He's killed people, no doubt. I just know it.
Not this again. Again.
The association had branches in every major city, but Gark, head of the capital's branch, was an ex-hunter. The former freak had switched careers after retiring from hunting, but his strength hadn't dwindled one bit in his years away from the field. Gark looked straight up terrifying, and he had no problem putting himself in between packs of fist-fighting hunters. To make matters worse, the man had had our backs since we'd first moved to the capital. My hands were tied. Man, this sucks. If I ignore him, he'll march himself right up here. The one time I'd accidentally ignored Gark's summons had become a huge pain in the behind. Ever since, Gark had remained pretty high up on my don't fuck with list. Besides, his assistant branch manager was a real angel who kept the guy's wrath in check, so meeting him there would make my life a whole load easier. I would have loved to send someone in my stead, but Eva, who handled practically every aspect of the clan, was no hunter. I couldn't knowingly send her in there. Maybe I'll have Ark go.
Don't you think you rely too much on him?
It's not like I can send anyone else. Strength by no means equals virtue with these hotheads. I sat for a while, desperately racking my brain for any other solution, but to no avail. All right, I'll go if I have to, but only 'cause there's no other choice. I don't want to go out there, especially not without a guard. That disguised relic of mine isn't any use either since I busted it. If the other grievers were here, one of them would have tagged along for my protection, but they were currently off taking on another high-level treasure vault, so there was no telling when they'd return.
You'll be fine. This is the capital, you know.
Spoken like someone who's never been attacked in the street. Of course, it's been a while since we kept crushing them. I placed my favorite among my newly polished rings onto my index finger and dropped the rest into a bag. From there, I bunched up my chain, fastening it to my belt, and stood up. Better get this out of the way. Maybe it was time to dust off my show-stopping groveling routine. The Zebridia branch of the Explorers Association stood nestled between a large shop and a bar, about a 15-minute walk from our clan headquarters. The branch was pretty small compared to the neighboring buildings, but it was no less lively than either of them. A modest flag depicting a treasure chest, the symbol of the association, against a red background fluttered above. I glanced left and right before entering the building. I had to barf, and stepping into that sauna of the freak show didn't do me any favors. There was a distinct difference between treasure hunters and ordinary folk. It had nothing to do with age, sex, or equipment, but somehow you could just tell by looking at them. If I had to explain, I'd say they were a whole other species. Though the capital was widely regarded as the holy land of treasure hunting, the city's hunter population wasn't all that large. Running into a hunter on the street was a pretty rare occurrence. That considered, a hive like this, which was teeming with freaks, was, in my book, one of the most dangerous spots in the city. The open lobby was filled with the clamor of shouting, laughter, and drunken singing. It was like a war zone. Its distinctive smell pervaded my nostrils. Blood, booze, and sweat, what some may call the stench of adventure. An enormous man, 2 heads taller than me, shot me a dirty look as he passed me, without a word. It was hard to believe we were both of the same species. The Explorers Association existed to support hunters. They've been around for as long as the treasure hunting occupation itself, handling everything a hunter could possibly require. The buying and selling of relics and monster parts, supplying parties with necessary items and information, and even referring potential party members. They were also the ones who ranked hunters, parties, and clans by assigning them levels. Non-hunters weren't barred from entering treasure vaults, per se. It was just a really dumbass thing to do. The much less deadly start to becoming a hunter was to join the association. Membership wasn't free, of course. Every hunter had to pay a tax derived from their annual income, in addition to performing other obligations. Once in a while, they'd even drop quests on you that were nothing short of punishment. Any clan as large as the Steppes could take care of themselves, and many of them were doing just that. I, however, preferred to stay on the association's good side, and since our dues were manageable, I'd accepted my role as association dog's body. And heck, their drop-dead gorgeous receptionist sure sweetened the deal. I could learn a thing or two from the way they ran their branch. I shouldered my way through the horde of hunters, my back straight and my head held high as I endured their musk of blood and adrenaline. Wading through these hunters with battle scars on their faces and bandages covering fresh wounds scared the hell out of me, but I knew from experience that keeping my head down would only make me more of a target. This was a place where the weak were eaten alive. It didn't matter that we were in the middle of a civilized city. Hunters only spoke one language: violence. Just then, I caught sight of a hunter sprawled over a newspaper. It wasn't a copy of Zebridia Times, but the front page displayed the same half-destroyed bar.
It wasn't my fault. I'm serious here. Don't those vultures have anything else to report on?
It sure is lonely at the top, huh? I muttered, a sardonic grin masking my urge to barf as I lined up at the reception. Despite my frantic prayers for my turn to never come, I was soon welcomed by the girl behind the counter.
Thank you for visiting the Explorers Association.
From what I'd heard, she wasn't a hunter, which was a back-end setup I could get behind. I slammed my hand against the counter, mustering as much fake swagger as I could to best maintain my facade as a badass hunter. I need to speak to branch manager Gark. He's expecting me. Put me through. Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsukikage, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story.
Yes. This is about the demolished bar now. One scolding coming right up. Oh, and just as a reminder, Mr. Andrey, you don't have to wait in line when you've been summoned.
She meant half demolished, no doubt. I'm so sorry. Sincerity was the key to an effective apology. My self-righteous attitude in public was merely for show. I had no problem throwing my pride out the window when I met Gark. He'd seen me in way more pitiful situations than this. Even the veteran branch manager was taken aback by my immediate prostration. His eyes widened as he stared down at me. Gark Welter may have looked like a freak, but deep down, he was a human. He stood above 2 meters tall, scars and tattoos crisscrossing his face, his bald head bulging with veins. He kept himself in such good shape that you wouldn't believe he was retired. Between that and the weapon he kept close at hand, he looked like a serial killer. Even so, Gark was a human of high importance, in fact. Kana, the beautiful and skilled assistant branch manager, was smiling beside Gark, plainly the beauty to his beast. Even so, I was pretty sure a literal beast would be better tempered than he was. It was good to see him again.
Hey, Krai?
None of this was on purpose. I didn't mean any harm. I made sure no civilians would get hurt, and I even spoke to the owner beforehand and got his permission to wreck the place. I was out of breath before Gark had a chance to recover from his surprise. Precisely because I was talentless, I understood hunters inside and out, as though from a non-hunter's perspective. I'd thought long and hard in advance about the consequences of my actions and gone to great lengths to avoid any serious trouble. Since becoming a hunter, the skills I'd improved on the most were apologizing, schmoozing, and talking my way out of things skills to write home about, am I right? I theatrically gesticulated to emphasize my tragic predicament. You know, I'm having just as much of a hard time dealing with them. They don't stop no matter what I do, so what choice did I have but to let them duke it out? Go on, tell me how I was supposed to stop this from happening. You don't think I wanted to? Of course I did. If you can solve that mystery, be my freaking guest. Keeping them from fighting wasn't an option. It really wasn't. That was why I'd let them blow off all that steam where no civilians would get hurt. Skipping the excuses might have served me better in most situations, but I was fishing for sympathy. After all, there was no way Gark was actually mad about this. For one thing, no normies got hurt. On top of that, no normies got hurt. And most importantly, no normies hurt. The association cracked down hard on hunter misconduct, but they didn't punish every misdemeanor. That'd be impossible. If they handed out fines for every fight, the association headquarters would be a castle by now. I rose suddenly to my feet, still apologizing as I closed in on Gark.
Hey now, you're not gonna beat your gums out of this one.
All they did was tear down a building. So what if we made the front page? There were no casualties. No complaints. What's the big deal with smashing down a building or two? That's way better than tearing through people. Look, we'll pay for the damages. I'm thick as thieves with the owner, and he's a super chill guy. It's fine. He'll laugh it off. Damn, I want some ice cream. The half-raised bar in question served incredible ice cream, despite it being a bar. In fact, it was one of the top 3 ice cream joints in the capital, according to me.
Now, calm down, Krai. There's no reason for Gark to be hard on you. No one's pressed any charges.
Kana's now spiel usually quelled Gark's rage. They had a good dynamic. Gark would lose his rag at people, while Kana sought to offer compromises.
I haven't even... whatever. Take a seat.
And all was forgiven. At least all this apologizing had its merits. I obediently parked myself on the plush couch, my need to barf slightly lessened. Just as I let myself relax for a moment, Gark slammed his hand on the table. I trembled from shock.
Baring his teeth, the branch manager glowered at me. You think I like calling you up here, Krai?
Then why did you?
No one's pressed charges, but even without any official complaints, that stunt of yours caused enough commotion to hit the papers. First Steps is one of the top dogs. A clan as prominent as that ought to be thinking of the example they're setting for other hunters. I can't let something like this one slide.
I stared at Gark, dumbfounded. He should have wagged his finger and sent me on my way by now. Judging by the standards of the association, this case should have been water under the bridge, easy breezy. No one, hunter notwithstanding, had gotten hurt. Destruction of property was punishable by imperial law, but this case would be settled by the terms of our agreement. If no one pressed charges, there was no reason for law enforcement to get involved. Sure, the papers had snapped up the story, but hunters were always making bad decisions. A bar almost crumbling to the ground was on the tamer side of the consequences, and there was no way Gark, a professional shit sweeper, saw it any other way. Case in point, things would have been much worse if any of the other grievers had been there. The most any reader of these headlines would have to say would be, "They're at it again. Us, a role model for hunters? Huh, what a joke." I turned to Kana to see her strained smile. So, that's it. Well, I could always leave all this up to Ark. Don't tell me. Chores? Gark looked like he'd bit into a lemon. The association's main purpose was to help hunters beat treasure vaults, but they also delved in the side hustle of referring third-party quests to its members. Since most hunters were superhumanly strong, merchants and even governments often sought them out for work, guarding caravans, hunting monsters, acquiring specific relics, and the like. The requested tasks came in all shapes and forms, and were most often taken up by novice hunters looking for some extra cash or by hunters looking to make connections outside of the hunter community. However, many of the quests struggled to find takers, be it for their measly rewards, lengthy duration, overwhelming difficulty, or downright bizarre nature. Most hunters, myself included, had no sympathy for those who submitted these crappy quests. They simply weren't our problem. That was until the association, compelled by some bureaucratic conundrum, started assigning them to pushovers and miscreants. With the utmost reverence, us hunters called these quests chores and avoided them like the plague.
Don't talk like that in my office.
You're an ex-hunter, Gark. You know better than anyone that this stuff's a pain. I'm responsible for my clan members' lives, after all. Clans came in many different forms, but ours was a democracy. Even my role as clan master had been decided by a majority vote, so I wasn't exactly all-powerful. Now that the tables had turned, I wasted no time, reclining back and crossing my legs. I met Gark's death glare with a sigh. The student had become the master. Relax, I'm not saying we won't do it. We've known each other for years, Gark, so I understand where you're coming from. We'll do you a solid, but just one. We didn't even screw up that bad this time.
You get better at goading every time I see you cry.
I kowtowed when I had to kowtow, and stood my ground when I had to stand it. That was my way of staying alive. Cowardice was the real killer here. Of course, I would have never pulled a stunt like this if I less than wholeheartedly trusted Gark not to mop the ground with me.
Bring it over.
Kaina produced a leather-bound folder and placed it in front of me. Quests referred this way by the association were pretty much mandatory, but I had heard rumors of hunters who simply refused to take any of them. Many hunters danced to their own tune and hated being tied down. This was especially true for experienced hunters who could take on the more troublesome quests. The folder sure was hefty, indicating a large pileup of chores. While I did feel sorry for Gark for having accumulated such a cumbersome stack of stinkers, our clan didn't run on charity. It would be one and done.
Pick one.
Yes, sir. I started flipping through the files. At least there were loads to choose from. I was looking to pick out the easiest gig to foist it off on Ark. Just thinking about most of these jobs was giving me a headache. Ark could have handled any one of them, being one of the best hunters in the capital, but his forte really lied in taking on treasure vaults. With that in mind, I picked out only quests in that area. Then I began scanning the level of the vaults involved. Level 5, level 6, level 5, another 5, level 4, level 6, 4, 3, 7, 6. Wait, a level 3? I flipped back to that particular file and checked the rest of the page. Yeah, this shouldn't be a problem. Heck, I'd hit the jackpot to score a level 3 treasure vault quest from a pile of reject chores. Not only was Ark Rodon one of the only capital hunters with an official title, the Argent Thunderstorm, he was ranked at an impressive level 7. The number indicated that the association had deemed Ark capable of taking on any vault up to that rank. While each vault packed its own set of challenges, a level 3 vault would be a walk in the park for the guy, even if he went in alone. The job paid close to nothing and would take him some time to complete, but it wouldn't exactly be a challenge. With such slim pickings, there was no point in overthinking it. I plucked out the file and waved it in Gark's face. We'll take this one. A little bit of carcass collecting never hurt anyone.
Watch your mouth, Krai. That's a search and rescue.
He was joking, right? There was no way those guys were still alive. The storm had passed. Once Krai left the room, Assistant Branch Manager Kaina breathed a sigh of relief. With the urgent quest folder tucked under her arm, she flashed Gark a tight-lipped smile.
The kid's as lively as ever, I see. Are you sure about this?
It's fine. He's better off with some wind in his sails.
The scorn in his expression earlier had now left without a trace. Hunters were an odd bunch to begin with, but Krai Andrey was far odder still. Krai had become a hunter 5 years prior, when the capital branch had accepted his application. One could even say that Gark had overseen Krai's entire career as a hunter. Krai had moved to the capital with 5 good friends from his hometown who had all become hunters along with him. Gangs of starry-eyed teens hung up on classic tales of adventure weren't all that uncommon to come by. That said, not many of them survived more than a few years as treasure hunters. Despite the demands of the profession, Krai had barely changed from the day he'd signed up. His feeble visage, flippant attitude, and even his shrewd ploys were much the same. He was marching unchanged on the path to glory, which made the kid quite the abnormal case for a hunter. The first steps were the rising stars of the capital. There were plenty of older, larger clans in the city, but those were already fully established. The steps, on the other hand, was still in its infancy. What the clan lacked in experience, it made up for in rate of growth. Their presence on the front page was a testament to their popularity. In contrast to First Step's roaring growth, Krai was the perfect picture of humility, a quality that Gark was grateful for. For a clan with as many connections and much strength as the Steps, there was little to gain from remaining under contract with the association. By now, many established clans, parties, and individual hunters had withdrawn from the association umbrella, which was a regular source of headaches for Gark. Skillful hunters were worth their weight in gold to the place, but he couldn't exactly stop them from leaving. Despite Krai's flippant tone and brazen manner, he was doing his bit to look out for them.
He was muttering stuff about wanting an easy one. Then he snagged the worst of the bunch.
Well, that's not so unexpected from Krai.
Kaina allowed herself a faint smile as she thought of how Krai had reached for that particular quest out of a folder of at least 24. The vault level on it may have been the lowest among them, but that didn't necessarily mean that that vault would be the easiest. Identifying danger was one of the most vital skills for any leader to possess, and the form Krai had read was wrought with warnings. Neither Gark nor Kaina thought for 1 second that Krai, the leader of Grieving Souls and the master of such a large and prominent clan, would misjudge the severity of a quest. In fact, when Krai had been confronted with similar situations in the past, he had often gone for the hardest of hitters. Perhaps this was his way of giving back a little.
Who knows what'll come of it? Krai's on it now, though, whatever it is. His attitude's one thing, but he's got a good eye for these things.
We sure do owe him one, don't we?
When I returned to the clan house, core in hand, I was slapped with unexpected news. What? Ark's not here. Why not?
A noble summoned him to discuss that prism garden job he cleared the other day. No doubt he won't be back for some time.
Oh, gotcha. Talk about bad timing. Ark Brave was one of the most famous parties in the capital, and its leader, the oh-so-friendly, oh-so-handsome Ark, radiated tolerance unbecoming of a hunter. Not to mention he was incredibly kick-ass. It was only natural that he would be called up by one of the Empire's nobles who were always looking to win over the freshest and finest. I should have seen it coming after he'd mopped the floor with that high-level vault the other day. All things considered, I was lucky to have had him until that morning. Still, the timing sucked. I'd pretty much picked our core at random, thinking Ark could be the one to take the rap. The guy was a tip-top employee aside from his many commitments. Sheesh. What am I supposed to do with this now then?
Why don't you do it yourself?
Is she saying I'm better off dead? By the look in her eyes, she was serious about it too. Some people more often than not, non-hunters had a nasty habit of underestimating treasure vaults, but those guys were living under a rock. Trust me, I've seen plenty of high-level vaults up close. All treasure vaults were packed with peril, and high-level vaults in particular were dangerous in and of themselves. Even if no phantoms or monsters appeared, there was no guarantee you'd return. The chore I'd brought back entailed a level 3 vault, so it wasn't that dangerous a job. That said, a non-hunter wouldn't stand a chance in anything higher than level 1. Besides, I was 1 foot into retiring from the front lines. I haven't taken on a vault in a while, so I'm probably pretty weak now.
That's what they call slacking off.
Hunters were strong, a whole other level of strong, and that freakish strength of theirs was in part due to the buildup of mana material. Since treasure vaults were chock full of mana material, hunters who spent most of their time raiding were constantly exposed to the stuff. As a result, hunters obtained powers beyond normal human capabilities. By absorbing mana material, hunters gained all kinds of boosts to their abilities. Chief among them was to their physical strength, but I had heard of some hunters who had developed special talents as a result. That considered, the more time a hunter spent in treasure vaults, and the higher the level of those vaults were, the stronger the hunter became. However, mana material didn't stick around the body forever. The time it took to deplete varied from person to person, but for hunters like me, who stayed in areas devoid of mana material, the power accumulated within the body quickly runs dry, reverting them to ordinary civilian status. This was why some hunters, those who continuously delved into treasure vaults, were stronger than most military personnel. I'd always been weak and talentless, but stepping away from the front lines had only made me weaker. A level 3 treasure vault wasn't much of a challenge to the average member of our clan, but it was an impossible feat for me, who was 1/2 step away from civilianhood. And while we're at it, I just didn't feel like doing it. If the deal had been that I would have to take up the gauntlet myself, I would have flat out refused. I was the weakest member of the steps by far, and I took that role very seriously. Still, where there's a will, there's a way. I turned on my heel, humming. Arc or no arc, I had the entire roster of the steps at my disposal. I was the clan master after all. Oh well. There's gotta be someone in the lounge looking for a job to do.
You really shouldn't be delegating urgent quests.
That was morally upstanding of her to say, and all, but we all had to play to our strengths. On the second floor of First Steps Clan House was the lounge, an open space bathed in sunlight from the large skylights installed in the ceilings. There were as many large tables in the room as there were parties in the clan, in addition to a bar by the wall. The lounge was a pretty convenient meeting spot, but it was more often the chosen hangout for members with free time on their hands, who could take advantage of the free drinks and simple meals offered at the bar. The dues I charged the clan members paid for said food and drink. I couldn't very well pocket any of that money, so I let Eva take care of finding ways to burn through any excess funds. Now it was one of the main selling points of our clan. It's funny how things turn out. I took a sweeping look around our magnificent lounge, then frowned in disappointment. Haha, no one's here. What are the odds?
Good morning, Master. You're all barefaced again. What happened to your mask?
It broke. It was the middle of the day, and Tino was the only one there. Where were the goons? Poor Tino had been sitting all alone, reading a book.
To say that she was the one responsible for nearly destroying that bar, there wasn't a trace of remorse in her expression as she approached me. I liked your real face much better than that weird mask.
I'd have been destroyed beyond repair if you'd said you prefer the mask to my face. Until very recently, I had always kept my identity hidden with a special relic, the reversible face, a mask of flesh that allowed me to change my face and voice at will. Some hunters were all about having their faces remembered, but I was the opposite. That relic had allowed me to maintain my sanity, but now it was gone broken, and I had no spare. Relics weren't manufactured, but rather came into being. Rare relics were not only difficult to come by, but spectacularly expensive. What's worse, relics that hid the user's identity from everyone without a certain level of perception couldn't be legally bought or sold. The only way to obtain one of these things was by stumbling across one in a treasure vault. My only option was to stay indoors as much as possible. I was gonna barf.
Master, where's Lizzie?
Wait, didn't she tell you? Liz and the others are off hitting up a treasure vault. That level 8 castle. They were pretty set on going deep and bringing something back this time. I doubt they'll be back anytime soon. If any one of them had stayed behind, they could have taken care of this chore off my hands. The timing sure did suck. All chores had deadlines, which meant it couldn't wait for them to come back.
By the way, Master, look what I got.
I nearly choked as Tino waved the familiar relic ring. Ugh, I hadn't expected this. Tino's shade was indeed improving at breakneck speed, but she still had a long way to go before she'd match up to the most powerful freaks around. I had caught her wasting Lil Gilbert with that sucker kick, but she wasn't skilled enough to fend off every freakish foe. At least that's what I'd thought, but the ring in her hand spoke for itself. Our cute little mascot had grown into a full-fledged freak herself. That was unless the other freaks of the clan couldn't bring themselves to take it from her.
I don't care one bit about that fake pretty boys party, but I couldn't let your ring fall into the hands of that little skunk. I can feel your will pouring through it, Master.
You know that's just a shooting ring, right? Shooting ring was an umbrella term for ring relics that fired shots of mana. Relics came in all shapes and forms, and had all sorts of abilities, but ring-type relics were among the most common of all. Shooting rings were the most common form of ring relics and were therefore the least valuable among them. That big-ass sword Lil Gilbert had been waving around was probably much more valuable. Still, since Tino had snagged the ring first, I didn't have to add any potential weirdos to Ark's party. I'd lucked out there. Tino looked so happy about the ring that I was starting to feel kind of guilty.
There's much to learn from what we can't see. That fake pretty boy said it was a fun event.
Ark. His name is Ark.
Master, can I really keep this?
I said so, didn't I? It's all yours. Sorry it's not something better.
Yay!
Not many hunters used shooting rings. It was hardly any use to Tino either, but that didn't seem to bother her. Heck, she was twirling around with happy little cheers. Wow, was she really that easy to please? I could have shed a tear for her. After all, she was the only one left. She'd do. She was level 4, so she shouldn't have a problem with a level 3 vault. Do you have any plans today, Tino?
What?
Tino froze in her tracks, her eyes widening in bewilderment. Since she worked on her own most of the time, she had a relatively flexible schedule, but that didn't mean she could take time off whenever she wanted. A hunter's job encompassed more than just hunting. They had to keep up with their training if they wanted to perform at their best, and prior research was essential to staying safe in each vault. The clan could support her to some extent, but lack of preparation cost hunters their lives. Solo hunting demanded even more meticulous prep. However, Tino soon beamed, which was pretty rare for her.
No, I don't have any plans today, tomorrow, or for the rest of my life. That's why I've been waiting for you, Master.
If Liz had overheard, Tino would have been thrown into the most grueling training regimen her mentor could think of. Did Tino really have so much free time? Since she apparently had nothing better to do, I felt less bad about assigning her the core. Perfect. The association gave us a quest. I'll leave it to you.
What?
Tino looked like I'd slapped her across the face.
Master, I've never in my life felt more betrayed. My innocent heart is in tatters. I never thought you could be so cruel. You tricked me.
I did not.
You led me on, only to push me off a cliff.
I didn't lead you anywhere or push you off of anything. Tino had already lost all of her enthusiasm before she'd even got going. All hope had been extinguished from her eyes. She laid her cheek flat on the table, glaring at me with newfound lethargy.
To be honest, I was ready to go get ice cream together or something.
Tino had a profound weakness for all things sweet, a weakness I was sure would be exploited someday. Your mentor told me not to give you anything sweet.
It's a ploy. Lizzie doesn't want you to go on dates with me when she's not around.
Dates? Like mentor, like apprentice, I supposed? Maybe it was my fault for taking her everywhere for a while instead of a proper bodyguard. I'd known her since she was just starting out, so she was almost as easy to use as Ark and my longtime friends. Her cuteness was also a plus. Asking tough-looking hunks of muscle to do dirty work took one hell of a mental toll. I shoved the assignment into Tino's dejected face. Here, Tino. I've got a fun job for you. Who wants to go on a job? Who?
Am I just a clanmate with benefits to you?
I think someone's tainted our little Tino's mind. Who taught her this stuff?
That was you, Master.
Her spirits still deflated, Tino started reading with only her eyes. She stared at the paper for a few moments before muttering,
This is the crappiest quest ever.
Sure is.
There's not a single silver lining. Who'd want any part of this?
Great question.
This is a chore, isn't it?
Uh-huh. That's how I'd found myself with it. Damn that Gark, treating our clan like a trash can. If there hadn't been a familiar face I could talk into taking it on, I would have turned down this dirty work. Even if it meant having an awkward conversation with Gark, the weak were always left to scoop up crap jobs like this. Some things never changed.
The disgusted Tino writhed in her seat before coming up with an excuse. I'm still only level 4, Master. A nobody. I would love to help you, I really would, but I'll have to respectfully resign myself. I can't rescue 5 people on my own. Besides, I just remembered something I have to do.
Tino leapt up. I blinked, and she was running out the door, leaving the trash tier quest behind without a taker. As expected of a budding thief. What a truly spectacular escape act. That explained how Tino had ended up with the relic ring. She'd taken it and ran. Bolting from Liz's backbreaking training sessions was doing wonders for Tino. Come to think of it, she and I had a lot in common. I unbunched the 2-meter-long chain from my belt and placed it on the table. The chain was a relic, one of a vast collection I'd amassed throughout my career as a hunter. The thin silver chain slithered like a serpent around the table, its links clanging as it moved. The chain was a loyal beast, a fangless dog that required neither food nor rest, forever faithful to its master. It was called the hounding chain. In the ancient past, before recorded history, was a tribe of people that wielded chains. Chains treated in a special way that moved without being touched. Each chain had possessed an extraordinary power that supported the tribe's livelihood. Today, all that remained of that civilization were the legends that told its tales, and I attributed the popularity of chain relics to those legends. And fire weighted no tale. Its import of the deep precision were the legends that told its tales, and I attributed the popularity of... The chain rose from the table, forming the outline of a small canine. When I jerked my chin, the chain fell flat and slithered out of the lounge.
Just for the record, Master, I could have run away.
Yeah, totally.
Your chain is persistent, tireless, and annoying, but I could easily break it. I'm not gonna though because I don't want you to hate me for breaking your favorite chain. Don't you feel like being a little merciful in my judgment now?
Tino was pleading with the same manipulative tone often employed by her mentor. She was learning all the wrong lessons. While my hounding chain was silver in color, it wasn't made of silver. Anything made from mana material was extremely durable. That said, plenty of freaks I hung around could easily tear it apart. Tino's confidence showed just how much she'd been pushing herself, and how much time she'd spent in vaults. Don't work yourself too hard, Tino. Safety first.
It's your fault, Master.
Your mentor's the one encouraging it. I only give you the easy stuff. At this point, the hounding chain relaxed and fell to the floor. Relics were handy and all, but had their limitations. The chain must have run out of mana, its energy source, while chasing Tino around. Her skill in being able to evade high-speed things in pursuit was actually impressive.
Rubbing herself where the chain had constricted her, Tino let out a sigh. I get it. I understand that you give us quests that bring us to the brink of death and back to maximize our growth, but there has to be a limit to your draconian training methods.
Excuse me? What part of this was draconian? The quest was at a level 3 treasure vault. Level 3? That wasn't exactly difficult for Tino. I wouldn't feed our mascot to the wolves. She just had to pick up a few bodies. Treasure vaults were fraught with danger. Hunters assumed those risks when they stepped foot into any vault. Rescue missions for failed hunters were few and far between. On rare occasions, though, quests popped up requesting aid for lost hunters, quests that were more bitterly known by those stuck with them as carcass-collecting gigs. When professional hunters went missing, they were more often than not already dead. If they were alive, they got rescued. If they were dead, we checked them off the list and went on our way. But as long as there was the slightest chance that the lost hunters were still alive, some poor soul had to go check. For as much flack as I gave her, Tino was a level 4 hunter. Maybe there was a reason she was reluctant to go. Feeling pretty stumped, I took another look at the request. The level 3 vault in question was the White Wolf's Den, not one of the easiest nor the most difficult vaults close to the capital. When it came to relics, its drop rate sucked, which made the vault neither lucrative nor popular. 3 days ago, 5 hunters had gone missing. That wasn't too long ago. If it had been a week ago, I wouldn't have held out hope for their survival. But as it stood, I was calling it 50-50. The quest would last a maximum of a week with a reward of 300,000 gild. That amount, which could feed the average household for a month, was more like pocket change for a hunter. In other words, this was basically volunteer work. I reread the request line by line but couldn't identify the problem. Even so, I looked up from it and gave a knowing nod. I understand what you're saying, Tino. You don't want to go alone, right? I got it. I really did. Underleveled or not, taking on any treasure vault was a dangerous task. Anything could happen. I'd been short-sighted and thinking Tino wouldn't mind taking on another quest alone. In fact, I'd gone along with this assuming they were all dead, but if they were alive, she'd have no chance. She couldn't carry 5 injured hunters.
Whoa. What? Well, I guess you're right.
Tino glanced around the empty lounge before turning back to look at me expectantly. After all, everyone was busy today. That was when I had a bright idea. The White Wolf's Den, something about that name sounded familiar. Since Tino was level 4, a few more level 3 or higher hunters should make her feel more secure. It was brilliant if I do say so myself.
If you would come with me, Master.
I've got it. There was a hunter at the recruitment drive last night who wanted to take on the White Wolf's Den. You should take her with you. I think her name was Ruda.
What?
As for the rest of the party, the great Greg and Lil Gilbert would work a treat. To top it all off, it'd be a good first-party experience for Tino. It was all coming together. With that settled, I gave myself a pat on the back, closely watched by Tino's pain-stricken eyes. Tino Shade, born and raised in the imperial capital, was a Zebrutian through and through. One could even say she was a little more reserved than most, despite her athleticism. More importantly, though, Tino had never wanted to become a treasure hunter. At some point in their lives, everyone dreamed of trying their hand at hunting, but discerning adults weren't so keen on taking such a dangerous plunge. Zabrudia was chock full of hunters and facilities related to the profession, but everyone had their place in life. Tino herself wasn't drawn to power, fame, or wealth. In fact, she was quite scared of hunters. Though she admired the great hunters she read about in stories, their lives had always seemed a far cry from her own. That life of hers had been turned on its head when a certain party had arrived in the capital, descending upon it like a shooting star. Among the countless parties with their fancy names, none had stuck out more than this one. The party, once shunned for their ghoulish name and antagonized by the Empire itself, had overcome every obstacle until in just a few years they had become a household name. Only by coincidence had Tino, who had lived so far removed from treasure hunters, come across that party, but that was all it had taken. One look, and she couldn't take her eyes off them. The girl who had before now had no interest in hunting had become mesmerized by their dazzling gleam, a gleam like a spark or a shooting star. The party's arrival had ignited a new era. The young hero Ruda was rumored to be the second coming of one of only 3 level 10 hunters in the world. Beside him stood Krai Andrey, the cunning bearer of Grieving Souls reigns, who founded the fastest growing clan in the vicinity. As if gravitating towards these two young hunters, whose talent shone brighter than any others, more and more talented young hunters emerged. This marked the golden age of treasure hunting, or so the association described it. Tino knew in her bones that this era would go down in legend and chose to become a hunter to carve her name alongside that of her master and trusted mentor. Now, however, the budding newcomer Tino had been demoted from apprentice to errand girl by the very master she adored. After a quick hunt around the capital branch of the Explorers Association, she caught sight of her target. Tino approached the hunter, browsing jobs posted on the quest board. When she was about a meter behind the hunter, the brown-haired, blue-eyed girl turned around. She saw Tino standing there and froze, wide-eyed. This was the hunter who had been with her master at the recruitment event. Krai had given Tino a description of her, but the girl's appearance had been burned into Tino's memory the moment she'd caught sight of them together. The hunter's name was Ruda, a level 3 who had come to the recruitment drive in the hopes of finding party members to take on the White Wolf's den. Her stance showed that she muffled her footsteps by second nature, which was a surefire giveaway that Ruda was a thief, the same as Tino. Although they shared a profession, Ruda was at a lower level than Tino, who was receiving proper training by her famous albeit meat-headed mentor. Ruda wouldn't have noticed Tino and her silent footsteps until she was up close.
What is it? Oh, you're the one who was with Krai yesterday.
None of that mattered. This was a request from her master, who was adored by her beloved mentor, and her master's decision was absolute, stilling the whirlwind of disgust within her. Tino stated her business.
I come at my master's Krai Andrey's request. I need to talk to you. Come with me.
Ruda's eyes widened further, but Tino turned her back, already on the hunt for the other subjects her master had given her the names of. The Great Greg was at the Golden Key, a bar frequented by treasure hunters, that stood next to the association building. Tino interrupted the merriment of the Great Greg and his peers to give a minimal summary of her request. Truth be told, Tino wasn't keen on the assignment. She didn't mind the quest itself so much. A level 3 vault was easy enough to take on alone. It was the party members that she hadn't come to terms with. Treasure hunters were encouraged to form parties, since going it alone in unknown vaults was often far too risky. Hardly any hunters excelled at all aspects of treasure hunting. Forming up simply allowed them to cover more bases. With that in mind, one might wonder why solo hunters existed at all. Simply put, it was extremely difficult for hunters to form a stable party. Differences in specialty, character, drive, values, and talent were all causes for clash. According to statistics gathered by the association, fewer than 1 in 10 parties lasted over 5 years. Exploring treasure vaults was a matter of life and death, making working with members that stepped on one another's toes a huge source of stress that could get you stabbed in the back. One of the golden rules of treasure hunting was to be extremely careful when choosing who to take on. Tino, at least, considered herself better off alone than forming up with hunters she was incompatible with, and she and the party members her master had assigned her were very incompatible indeed. Their skill sets, personality types, and overall objectives were all discordant with hers. She would have trusted her master with her life, but this was a different matter. This isn't what I meant at all, master. I wanted to go with you, not with a bunch of strangers. As Tino stood there, wallowing in her regret, the Great Greg pondered the offer. Turn me down, Tino thought, then I can tell master I tried. She had interrupted him drinking with his friends. He could very well laugh her out of the building. As Tino clung to that thread of hope, the Great Greg's face twisted into a smile.
You betcha. Sorry, guys. See you later.
The next haunt of the list was First Steps Clan House. Its lounge in particular was well known among hunters. The clean space and stylish bar made it unlike any other joint in town, decked out with white tables and enough chairs to seat full parties around them. This wasn't a place suited for raging parties, but Steps parties often met up in the lounge to celebrate after making it through treasure vaults alive. In one corner of the lounge, Ruda was looking around nervously. Greg was cocking a brow in curiosity, somewhat more quiet than usual. Tino, the ringleader, was staring straight ahead, devastated.
So what's this all about?
This is the famous Steps Lounge, huh? I'll take getting in here as a win.
Tino was staring at a boy a little taller than her who was sitting there grumpily with a greatsword relic, the purgatorial sword strapped to his back. Tino could have cried out that her party members had all convened. What had she done to deserve this treatment from her master?
What's this about? I don't have all day.
The greatsword on his back shone in the sunlight. Gilbert was the runt Tino had beaten to a pulp during the recruitment event. Of all 3 hunters appointed by her master, he was the one Tino wanted to include in her party the least. Considering that attitude of his, she hadn't expected him to tag along, not that she'd had any intention of actually finding him in the first place. If she hadn't run into him on her way out of the bar, she would have reported back that she'd failed to find him. In fact, Tino would have been completely happy if she hadn't located any of the 3 hunters sitting before her. Only out of respect for her master had she gone through the motions of searching for them. That should have been the end of it. But she'd somehow managed to find all 3 of the ragtag bunch in such a vast city almost by accident. Even so, there was still hope. There was still a chance they could turn her down. Tino wasn't the only one touchy about parties, not to mention a temp party for a practically thankless chore. Heck, Tino couldn't call any one of them an acquaintance, let alone a friend. All things considered, they were more likely to tell her where to stuff her quest. She drew a deep breath and readied herself, clinging to her last hope. I'm sorry, master, she thought. I'll never again complain about working alone. Please, save me. 3 pairs of eyes awaited Tino's next words. With quivering shoulders and an unseen knife to her throat, the little thief began to beg.
Please, once you hear what I have to say, feel free to say no. Master has assigned me a chore to complete, and he suggested I form a party with the 3 of you. That's why I asked you here, to ask you to join my party. Please feel free to say no. Please.
In my office on the top floor of the clan house, which was off limits to the average member, I had just finished describing my master plan to Eva. She stared at me in silence for a few moments before her eyes glinted behind her glasses.
That sounds to me like throwing spaghetti at the wall.
How dare you! That was extremely rude of her, no matter how accurate the statement was.
Isn't it premature to have Tino lead a party when she spent her whole career hunting solo?
I'm doing her a favor, you know. I replied with a purposefully stoic expression. She only sighed. Eva had a point, though. I may have been the leader of the Grievers and master of the Steps, but I didn't exactly fret about my decisions. Back in the beginning, I'd spent many a sleepless night mulling things over, but I'd grown tired of that pretty quickly. I'd always been the one making decisions for our party, and the number of those decisions had only increased when I'd established the Steps. Since we'd made a name for ourselves, parties and clans we weren't even affiliated with had started asking for my advice. Even the association had come knocking on our door on several occasions now. Eventually, I'd given up taking every little decision seriously. I certainly wasn't going to be responsible for anything that happened because of my advice. That sure as hell wasn't what I'd started the clan for. The only decisions that still kept me up at night were those pertaining to my own party, Grieving Souls. It was all good. After all, Tino kicked ass. Even her mentor vouched for her speed. If something did happen to go catastrophically wrong, she could always just turn tail and run. If somehow she couldn't, that was on Tino. Hunters took responsibility for their own lives. When death lay around every corner, it was up to them to prepare for the unexpected. If Tino faced hardships because of the party I'd selected, it'd be her fault for not protesting it enough. No one else was going to take the rap for a mistake like that. A good hunter had to learn to say no like I had when I'd sworn off so many treasure vaults early in my career. I hoped this experience would teach Tino a little something about being a bit more assertive. My wall spaghetti tactic was actually a well-calculated lick of tough love, a show of my concern for Tino's future. That was all I had to say on the matter. I wish I could dump all this hassle and head to a hot spring.
Perhaps we should plan a clan retreat.
That'd be pretty awesome. Why not get all the staff together? Eva had worked her ass off at a large commercial firm before I'd recruited her as my assistant. Her out-of-the-box thinking was likely down to her background. A retreat, that was certainly a thought. The capital was a major city. While crime was relatively low and the roads leading in and out of it were well maintained, monsters and even wandering phantoms from nearby treasure vaults would sometimes pick their prey from the path. Then there were the bandits. Traveling wasn't normally an easy task. At least my bunch didn't need any bodyguards, because they hunted monsters on a daily basis. That was one small perk of being a hunter. I couldn't force anyone to come, but I felt like most of them would tag along if I fed them some crap about team building. The only problem was that if the whole clan were to pack their bags for a trip, the association or some jackass of nobility would be sure to complain. Then, there were the meatheads of the clan who caused trouble wherever we went. Maybe the most I could handle was a party retreat, rather than packing up the whole damn clan. Though, on second thought, no. My party was on the top of the list of troublesome meatheads. I was stuck here and ready to barf. Battling my despair, I flipped through the papers Eva and her team had compiled for me, which contained detailed records of Tino's new party members. The steps kept stacks of documents on treasure vaults and individual hunters, unless they were completely green. Ruda was very competent. In just half a year, she had climbed the ranks to level 3, which was astonishingly fast for a solo hunter. Her surviving this far without any major injury was an indication of both talent and luck. The Great Greg was a veteran. There weren't too many hunters who could work for as long and as steadily as he had. Then, there was Lil Gilbert, a troublemaker with the chops to back up his attitude. He had belonged to a party from the countryside, but apparently he'd left because he couldn't get along with his party mates. That wasn't uncommon for hunters, though. One wrong move and the grievers could have been the same. My life would be so much easier if we had. Looking at the party overall, they were mediocre talented but nothing exceptional. Every hunter with their sights set on the capital was confident in their abilities. But I knew what true freaks looked like. True freaks who made their way through cutthroat treasure vaults with nothing but their strength and wits, paying no regard to their own safety. After going through the files, I was reassured of my decision. None of the party members were crazy powerful, but a chore like this would pose them no issue. If Tino could handle it herself, the 4 of them would find it a breeze. I might not trust my ability to seek out talent, but I had every faith in the strength of my clan members.
I wonder if they'll be all right, though. That place may be rated level 3, but there must be something about that quest to make the association pass the buck to us.
Look, they're fine. If they weren't, they would have looked for other members in the clan to help them out. Tino's not a kid anymore. Tino had been in the clan since its beginnings. Even though Eva played a different role to us hunters, I could see how watching someone grow up in our clan would make Eva care for them like you would a kid. I gave a reassuring shrug. Tino could take care of herself. Hunting alone, when no one else could save you from a jam, required a heightened sense of danger. There was nothing to worry about. Suddenly, the door to my office flew open without so much as a knock.
Master, help me. I can't do it.
Aren't you giving up too soon, Tino? Tino's eyes flew from me to Eva as she darted into the room. From there, she bodied me, digging her head into my stomach. It had to be an act. She was being way too dramatic for this sort of problem. What a minx! Based on how long it'd been since I'd handed her the core, she hadn't even checked out the vault yet. Moreover, hunters weren't allowed in my office. Eva stared exasperatedly at Tino. Hadn't I told her there was nothing to worry about? I was starting to think that mentor of hers was a really bad influence on her. What's the problem?
All of it, Master. I'm not ready for all this.
All of it, huh? That didn't sound good. Tino propelled me into the lounge, where the rest of them were waiting. I don't know what she'd bribed them with or how she'd pulled it off, but I was pretty impressed she got them together so quickly. Nice one. Standing before me were Ruda Runebeck, the Great Greg, and Lil Gilbert. I'd named them for no particular reason. Ruda's name had sprung to mind because she'd mentioned the White Wolf's Den, but the Great Greg and Lil Gilbert had been random draws. All 3 of them were pretty capable, their personality flaws notwithstanding. I hadn't considered how they'd divvy up tasks or work together, but I was a strong believer in strength in numbers. They might not have to go that deep since this was a search and rescue. As long as the party could get along long enough, they'd all make it out alive. Not that I'd ever want to join a party like that. Ruda was restlessly surveying the lounge, while the other 2 seemed a little uneasy, and rightfully so. A hunter, sitting in the clan house of a clan they didn't belong to, would feel like wading into enemy territory. As Tino led me over by the hand, Ruda soon spotted me and looked relieved. Come to think of it, she and I had parted without many words once the brawl had broken out. I hadn't had much of a choice, but that didn't mean I couldn't feel a twinge of guilt.
Hey, Krai.
Took you long enough.
Cutting Ruda off and prompting a glare. The kid was as arrogant as ever, but both his tone and words were dialed down, perhaps due to the volatile environment. Still, the kid sure had some guts to follow Tino here after having his face kicked in.
Here you are. In the Steps HQ. You really are in the Steps HQ. You really are a griever. Ha.
Okay. In the interest of making my life easier, I set them to a combined threat level E. With Tino by my side and a home field advantage, I could afford to be a little assertive.
I was really surprised back there when you said you'd been to so many of those events. I thought,
I hadn't meant to deceive her. I guess falling in line had been an airhead move. It's not like I could have just parted the line and strode right in, though. Especially when it was my fault I'd overslept.
Our conversation must have put Lil Gilbert at ease somewhat, because he threw me a dirty look. I expected you grievers to look stronger. I heard you guys were the strongest party in the capital, but I guess that ain't true.
Of course it's not. Who's been spreading those rumors?
I asked, but I already knew the answer. My friends. Every one of them was cocky beyond belief. Sure, we were one of the strongest parties for our generation, but the Braves were as young as us, and there were plenty of long-standing powerhouses stronger than us in the capital. By no means were the Grievers the strongest party out there. Tino squeezed my arm, making me grimace. Modest as they were, two soft peaks were pressing against my arm. She was doing it on purpose, no doubt. Her mentor's poor influence was showing again. This was getting out of hand.
They're so insolent. I can't go into a treasure vault with people like this, who have no respect for you. You're our master.
Sure, whatever that means. I smiled and nodded because it didn't matter. Even if I weren't a clan master, I would still just be me.
Wait, master, as in clan master? Of the Steps?
Humbly at your service, your greatness. No title I had or ever could have would hold a candle to the great Gred.
The 1,000 tricks?
If you know who my master is, you should kneel before him and beg for his forgiveness.
Ruda, meanwhile, was looking confusedly between us.
I wished Tino would stop trying to terrorize her new comrades. I was so ready to barf.
1,000 Tricks, master of stunts and schemes too ingenious for the eye to decipher. That was the title that had been thrust out of pity upon this puppet head of Grieving Souls. In the treasure hunting industry, hunters who were exceptionally famous or accomplished were given a title by the association. Getting one of these titles was like becoming a superstar among hunters. While a title didn't come with any tangible perks, earning one was considered the highest honor a hunter could receive. Speaking of superstars, Grieving Souls demanded attention like no other party. In addition to its memorably ominous name, each of its members, except for me, was remarkably talented, forever reaching new heights, while fearlessly risking their lives to do so. With them conquering vault after vault like the picture-perfect hunters they were, it was inevitable that my friends earned their own titles. Every member of Grieving Souls, again except for me, was highly talented in their respective field, which earned titles according to their specialties, and Pentrits was highly talented in their respective field which earned titles, and Igenabe said. The problem was me, their leader. I never took on any of the traditional roles in a hunting party. All I did was shed every bit of what little ego I had to apologize on my party's behalf. Everywhere we went, while simultaneously calming the tremendous storms that were my friends to keep property damage and casualties to a minimum. None of that had equated to any accolades on my part. What's this dweeb doing in a horde of freaks? The higher-ups at the association must have been thinking. The Grievers had produced undeniable results, and it wouldn't make much sense to give every member of the party, but its leader, a title. People would start to doubt their judgment. Thus, I had earned my title because I was somehow the leader of a party of freaks. The public's perception of Grieving Souls because of that was of a mysteriously impressive party, led by some hunter called 1,000 Tricks. My title, no doubt concocted with plenty of sarcasm on the association's part, had painted me as an unseen badass that never bothered to fight his own battles, a grandiose mirage I was pretty happy to perpetuate. Disproving this myth would only lead to people realizing how weak I truly was, making me a walking target. I couldn't have that. Besides, having my abilities grossly exaggerated came with its perks. Pale-faced and trembling, the great Greg stared at me. Sometimes, people who discovered my title still saw me as weak enough to trample over, but this guy clearly knew better.
No way. They said you're young, but not this young.
That doesn't really matter. At that moment, it hit me that I didn't know what I was supposed to do. How much had Tino told them? Needing help with all of it didn't exactly narrow down the problem. I looked down at Tino, who was giving me puppy dog eyes. Those told me everything I needed to know. At the very least, I was pretty good at reading a room. No doubt she wanted a few words from me to get this rowdy bunch on the same page. Useless as I was, my position of power gave my words considerable weight. I gave Tino a little nod, and her eyes lit up. Don't you worry about a thing, little Tino. I gathered you all here today to ask for your assistance with the job I gave Tino. For some reason, Tino's face contorted. She sure was a worrywart. The request was a sudden one, but the fact that all three of them had followed Tino here meant we had a shot at them agreeing. A word from me should be enough to get them working as a team. Ruda had wanted to take on the White Wolf's den from the get-go, and the great Greg knew a thing or two about hunters. I felt that he and I shared a philosophy: don't bare your teeth at the bigger beast. We should talk it out over a drink sometime.
Speaking of bared teeth, the last of the newly recruited trio was snarling in my direction. Your 1,000 tricks, the strongest hunter in the capital. Is this a joke? You look like you haven't trained a day in your life.
The strongest? Me? Seriously, who's been spreading this stuff? I'm the one who has to foot the bill every time.
As I tried to deny the accusation, Tino stepped out in front of me. Poor little idiot. He doesn't understand my master's strength. It's like he's wasted 90% of his life.
You're not making any sense, Tino. Shut up a minute, will ya?
Master, I can't team up with him. People who talk big but can't back it up are the worst.
That would include me, Tino. Lil Gilbert sure had a point, though, when he said I looked like I hadn't been training, because I hadn't. If he and I squared off in a fair fight with equal equipment, he'd smoke me.
You dumbass. Learn to pick your fights. You don't go waving your fists at the youngest hunter ever to make it to level 8, even before Arc Rodan.
Let go of me, old man. Damn it. There's no way he's stronger than me.
If I reached out my hand, he probably would have snapped at it. I've said it before, but the kid sure had some guts. If I were in his shoes, I would have already been groveling on the ground for forgiveness. In fact, his fighting spirit and temper were on par with a first-rate hunter. Will you help us out?
I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for me. Are you really level 8?
I decided to pull back the reins before things got out of hand. Levels assigned by the association were far from straightforward indications of strength. They were decided through multifaceted calculations. The numbers racked up on their own. When you're a party leader or clan master, you earn points based on the accomplishments of other members in your organization. With steps being as large as it didn't take long to earn the points to level up.
Your points are off the chart in my book, Master.
Ruda looked half convinced. Earning points that way wasn't a loophole, by the way. Thanks to the association encouraging growth in the hunting community, all high-level hunters took on responsibilities as party leaders, clan masters, or mentors. How else could I have earned a higher level than Ark, who's always out on the front lines?
You heard him. He cheated his way to level 8. You're not a top hunter. You can't be.
Guts or no guts, this kid was starting to get on my nerves. Level 8 isn't the top, you know? Well, whatever. I don't care if you believe me or not. I was used to being looked down on. I mean, sure, I looked weak, and I was weak compared to the freaks in the steppes. I was only clan master because no one else wanted to do it. If someone were willing to take my place, I'd step down in a heartbeat. I'd feel bad for Tino, but she could afford to lose one out of the 3. Forget it, Lil Gilbert. How about you, your greatness? Will you help us?
What?
Lil Gilbert's eyes grew wide as Tino pumped her fist for some reason.
Oh, me? Of course I'll help.
I know I'd told Tino to call them all here, but I wasn't going to force Lil Gilbert to join a party he didn't want to join, much less beg him to do so. My ego aside, this was my clan's lounge. None of my members would be happy to see their master beg for anything. Why should I risk the morale of the entire clan for a chance of adding this piece of crap to Tino's party? If Lil Gilbert were as strong as Ark, I might have considered it, but he was a level 4 combatant. We had plenty of those in the clan already.
Hey, you sure about this? I'm not gonna help you, you know.
That breaks my heart. But oh well. Tino, if you don't think the 3 of you can handle it, take someone else from the steps. A few of them would be day drinking in the bar next door, no doubt.
Please, please, come with me, Master.
Hell no. Why would I go? A level 3 treasure vault might have been a walk in the park for a freak, but it was still deadly to the likes of me. As much as I was willing to admit Tino's strength, she wasn't up to snuff as a bodyguard. Even though I'd answered her clearly enough, Tino kept her teary eyes trained on me. She had fawned on me plenty of times before, and I had always taken it in my stride as the cool older brother figure in her life. Still, this was getting to be a bit too much. As I grabbed her by the head and started to peel her off of me, Lil Gilbert began yelling to force our attention back to him.
I challenge you.
Was he out of his mind? Even Tino, with my hand still on her head, blinked in confusion.
I challenge you, 1,000 tricks. If I lose, I'll join the party.
Huh? What did you say to me, you little... I swallowed my words. This was a whole new level of being looked down on. Not to borrow Tino's words, but he had no idea what he was up against. I was a certified level 8 hunter. Sure, I was a pathetic weakling, but the disparity in strength between the average level 8 hunter and level 4 hunter was insurmountable. Even the level 7 arc would see Gilbert as nothing more than a speck of dust. Most importantly though, why would I, 1,000 tricks, ever get into a fight I had no guarantee of winning just to convince a little snot bubble to join a party? I'd weaseled my way out of every conflict that had come my way. If this kid wanted to fight me, he'd have to go through every single member of the steps. Even the great Greg was astonished at the kid's recklessness.
I won't follow anyone who's weaker than me.
Then you'll have to beat Tino, won't you?
What?
I mean, she was the leader of their party.
You really know how to deflect, Master. Very well. I, Tino Shade, shall smite thee in dear Lizzie's name for your blasphemy against our master. Look at me, Master. Lizzie really stretched me out. You can put me in any position you like.
Sure. Whatever that means, Tino, I'm sure it's great. Tino was doing a split. Her legs spread 180 degrees, her torso flat on the ground. Her dark hair, cropped to her shoulders, was spread in a midnight black puddle on the floor around her. Flexibility was a necessity for any hunter, especially for a thief. Liz could fold herself up like an invertebrate and fit into an unbelievably tiny suitcase. Tino was completely calm in the face of her skirmish. That training of hers must have been paying off. She was the only apprentice of Liz Smart, the thief of Grieving Souls, but she had already grown stronger than the average hunter. Liz's curriculum was mostly self-concocted. I'd heard that there were 2 types of geniuses in the world, thinkers and doers. Liz, ever the doer, had taken all the training she had personally experienced, cranked up the severity, and inflicted it all on Tino. Having survived the kind of training that implied murderous intent on her mentor's part, Tino never froze in the face of a challenge. That, of course, was much unlike me, who was always on the verge of barfing my guts out. Our cute little mascot was a freak in her own right. The First Steps clan house contained several underground floors that housed training facilities. To test Lil Gilbert's mettle, I had booked the first basement level, an open space of 10,000 square meters. The steps had all sorts of facilities dedicated to practicing specific skills, but this floor in particular was designed for practice matches. The ceiling was 5 meters high, roughly twice the height of the average ceiling, to allow for enough elbow room for fighters to maneuver on every level. The floor was as hard as the ground itself, so even the toughest of hunters would take some damage if they were to be knocked flat against it. Eyes blazing, Lil Gilbert stared at Tino and me. Tino lying flat on her back, her thighs exposed, and the nape of her neck peeking through her hair made for a somewhat seductive sight, but the boy before her saw nothing but an enemy. He really believed he was going to win. Oh, to be young again, the kid kind of reminded me of Luke back in the day.
You think this is a game?
She's level 4, just so you know. Lil Gilbert's eyes widened. Apparently, he hadn't expected her to be the same level as him. Though Tino had a bit of an aloof air about her, as long as she kept quiet. She was small, even smaller than Lil Gilbert, who was small for a guy. Still, he couldn't afford to underestimate Tino, while swordsmen like Lil Gilbert would suffer from a small stature and lack of muscle. The same couldn't be said for thieves. For them, being light on their feet was an important weapon. After completing a series of stretches, Tino stood up and faced off against Lil Gilbert.
I'm a speck of dust compared to my master.
Who do you think I am, Tino? She was overselling me like I was going out of sale. Tino undid her belt and tossed it aside, her dagger and item pouch still attached to it. By the looks of things, she was going in with her bare hands.
I'll go easy on you, so you don't end up dead.
You what?
Gilbert looked like he might pop a vein. Tino was doing a spectacular job of triggering the kid.
Is she gonna be okay?
Probably. Although Tino and Gilbert were at the same level, I knew just how talented Tino was. She was only at level 4 because she was going at it solo. With the right party, she could have been level 5 already. After all, she was training under the watchful eye of one of my friends, a certified freak in the holy land of hunting. The problem was that swordsmen were typically unparalleled when it came to close combat. The association certainly didn't hand out levels on a whim. Despite his flaws, something about Lil Gilbert warranted a level 4 assessment. We'd be fools to underestimate him. Besides, that great sword of his was a relic. Relics represented a myriad of potential which could more than make up for a difference in levels. From what I saw during the recruitment drive, his sword didn't possess any unusual powers, but any relic could make or break a fight. Tino didn't have a relic at her disposal besides the shooting ring I gave her, which was barely usable in combat. So he was barely usable in combat, so he was one up against her. However, she was one up against her. However, she had both freaks. Meanwhile, Gilbert finally snapped. He tossed his great sword aside and cracked his knuckles.
Huh, I don't need a weapon to take on an unarmed girl.
So Gilbert, a swordsman, had tossed aside his sword along with his last brain cell apparently. Tino had made a show of tossing her dagger aside to go easy on him, but she actually fought best hand-to-hand, well foot to foot, since she favored kicks. This fight had already begun before the bell. There's no such thing as cowardice on the battlefield. Even if her opponent had the upper hand, Tino seemed set on beating the kid to a pulp. The pair squared off about 5 meters apart.
I'm gonna get ice cream with you, Master.
I never promised you that. Lil Gilbert was grinding his teeth. Anyone would be pissed off by Tino's display? Then it occurred to me that, while I most certainly had not promised Tino any ice cream, I was always asking for favors without offering anything in return. I wouldn't mind hanging out with her once in a while, especially since she'd make a decent bodyguard. All right, sure. We can go once you finish the quest.
Really?
In that instant, Tino's graceful dance became a sharp leap, accelerating to top speed in a split second. Her eyes changed from those of an innocent girl to those of a ferocious predator. It was a magnificent maneuver, even when viewed from the safe distance where I was standing. Swordsmen excelled in brute force, while thieves emphasized dexterity. A thief's main role in a treasure vault was to pick locks and scope for enemies, but that didn't mean they weren't capable fighters. They were shadowy warriors who killed silently in the blink of an eye. The 5 meters between the two fighters vanished in an instant. By the time Gilbert even registered that she'd moved, Tino's hand was flying straight for his neck. The move seemed a little scummy on Tino's part, since I hadn't even called for the fight to start. Gilbert, however, wasn't completely caught off guard as he took a quick step back to avoid the attack. As if all her movements were part of one fluid strike, Tino launched her knee into Gilbert's stomach, knocking the boy back some distance. It was a massacre. Tino's attacks weren't as powerful as those of a swordsman, but her slender arms possessed enough of a threat against the armorless Gilbert. Ruda and the Great Greg were stunned into silence by the lightning-fast assault.
Did you see, Master? I totally smote him.
This isn't over yet.
Gilbert slowly picked himself up, having slid several meters across the ground. He coughed and wavered for a moment, but he was far from immobilized. He was tough. A human body constantly seeped in mana material became strong enough to go toe-to-toe against a wild beast. Their very blood, flesh, and bones were inhuman. Gilbert's toughness was testimony that the kid was a warrior.
I'm sure you realized, but I went easy on you. I could have snapped your neck. Now that you've learned your lesson, you should stop talking back to my master. Worship him as your god. Face the clan house and pray 3 times a day, and bring me offerings at regular intervals. I'll be sure to deliver them for you.
Without a word, Gilbert charged forward with a speed befitting of a level 4 hunter. I took a quick step away from the soon-to-be crash site. That charge was a pretty reckless move, though. The boy didn't seem well-versed when it comes to fighting other hunters. This might even have been his first time facing off against a thief. Tino spun around and evaded the charge. As he tried to grab her arm and catch her by surprise, she parried his hand with hers before striking Gilbert's temple with the heel of her palm. The supposedly strong Gilbert staggered a few steps, then toppled to the floor. He tried desperately to clamber to his feet, but he couldn't seem to focus his eyes. His brain had been thoroughly rattled. Perhaps I should have applauded him for trying to move in that state. I would have barfed for sure.
Take a look at that, Master. It's all thanks to you I've grown so much.
She should have been telling that to Liz rather than me. It's not like I had anything to do with Tino's training.
She's strong, overpowering a swordsman head-on, even if the kid was unarmed. More than anything, she knows how to fight. Are you sure she's a teenager? Is this what it takes to join the steps?
I've never even tried unarmed combat. I wonder if she'd teach me.
An unarmed swordsman wasn't a swordsman at all. There was really no need for this.
This isn't over. I can still fight.
Lil Gilbert staggered to his feet. He didn't have any open wounds or anything, but his equilibrium was shot and his eyes were still hazy. Lil Gilbert had lost as soon as he'd fallen for Tino's trap and ditched his sword. Miracles weren't exactly a thing. The kid had no shot, so I had to wonder if it were his pride as a hunter forcing him to his feet. Back when I'd still burned with a passion for treasure hunting, had I had that kind of guts. His ability to get back on his feet after being completely obliterated was a talent in and of itself. When I'd teased him with a recommendation to join the Braves, I hadn't meant anything by it, but it seemed that Lil Gilbert had what it took to be a hunter, after all. Recklessness was a valuable trait that couldn't be taught. While hunters had to watch their backs to stay alive, some things couldn't be gained by playing it cautious. Tino was looking like I'd just asked her to watch paint dry, so I clapped my hands in encouragement. Give him a shot, Tino. I never said how the match would be decided. Beat him up until there's no hard feelings. It'll be a good lesson. They'd be good friends in no time once they traded a few punches, right? Gilbert Bush was talented. Ever since he'd been old enough to take up a sword, he'd been instructed to build his strength. Hard work had never betrayed him. The years he spent with a sword in his hand, sometimes learning from mentors, sometimes through trial and error, made him increasingly stronger. By the time he was 10 years old, no child or adult in his village came close in terms of ability. Talents came in many forms, but among them were exceptional rates of mana material absorption and capacity that could be absorbed. The faster a person could absorb the stuff, the stronger they grew in a shorter time. The greater their capacity, the more strength they could obtain. Gilbert possessed both of these talents. His absorption speed and capacity far exceeded those of the average person, so much so that, even living in his village with little mana material in the air, he had grown stronger than anyone else. It was only natural that Gilbert Bush would walk the path of a hunter. Gilbert knew that the quickest way to get his hands on everything he wanted was to take on treasure vaults. Mowing down phantoms and monsters. Exploring mana material-filled vaults also gave him a caliber of strength unobtainable in his village. As soon as he turned 15, Gilbert packed his bags, defying the protests of his friends and family to move by himself to the capital. He had never been to the capital before, and he was elated to discover a grand city full of life. He ate food he'd never eaten in his self-sustained village, and admired the countless buildings lining the streets. Each street, wide enough for several carriages to ride side by side, was packed with so many people, a stranger might think there was a festival going on. Most impressively, though, were the countless people dressed in the garb of treasure hunters, which had been a rare sight back in his village. Gilbert's rapid progress showed no sign of stopping even after he registered with the Explorers Association and began taking on treasure vaults. Unlike most other rookies, Gilbert had had plenty of training prior to starting his career, and his talent was a cut above the rest. Above all, he had so much courage the association scolded him for his recklessness, but he had the luck to make up for it. His talent truly began to blossom once he formed a party with 4 other rookies. Together, they took on treasure vaults of increasingly higher difficulty. The greatsword he had come across in his very first vault allowed him to easily take down phantoms with ease and stave off hordes of monsters. In the golden age of treasure hunting, Gilbert was considered part of the second generation. He wasn't thrilled by the distinction, but he also knew that plenty of hunters were beyond human understanding. Some old-timers especially had become unbelievably strong through their countless explorations of treasure vaults and years of intaking mana material. By then, Gilbert had come face to face with plenty of hunters he didn't stand a chance against, but he had come to accept that fact. He had time, and with time, he would one day reach the same heights. He was sure of it. Gilbert's future gleamed like a golden stairway to glory. That future had only begun to darken a few weeks ago.
I'm finally all warmed up. I'll make easy work of this quest now, you'll see. Your wisdom is awe-inspiring, Master.
Gilbert forced his battered and bruised body into motion, glowering at Tino, who was looking icily down at him as if he were an insect. Tino was strong, terribly strong, even though she was a similar age to him. Each one of her blows came hard and fast. None of Gilbert's reckless attacks, each of them powerful enough to damage a phantom, had so much as scratched Tino, while he hadn't managed to dodge or parry a single attack of hers. This girl was nothing like the thugs who'd picked fights with him before now, or the phantoms he had faced in vaults. Most notably, Tino's moves were tailored to human combat. Phantoms sure as hell didn't try to concuss their opponent or fend off attacks with their palms. To make matters worse, she'd done all of that with ease. Gilbert had been told that the steps attracted many talented young hunters, but he hadn't expected anything like this. While the first hit had been unexpected, he hadn't underestimated her after that. Simply put, she was far stronger than him, so much so that he could hardly believe they'd been assigned the same level. Not having his sword on him was no excuse. He had chosen of his own volition to fight empty-handed because she had no weapons either, but he had no intention of making excuses. His goal lied far beyond the horizon.
Are you still conscious?
Gilbert tried to stand, but he didn't have the strength. He couldn't feel his fingers. He couldn't move his limbs. Even if he could stand, he certainly couldn't move the way he wanted to. Enhanced by mana material, Gilbert's body was durable enough to survive a few bullets. He'd been severely wounded plenty of times during hunts and had even faced mortal danger. This, however, was the first time he had been beaten so badly by an unarmed human being.
Gah, damn it.
You can use that sword if you want.
Gilbert's main weapon was still lying in the corner of his eye, where he had tossed it before the match. The Purgatorial Sword was a relic Gilbert had acquired in a level 1 treasure vault called the Veterans Parade Ground. The sword had supported Gilbert's career from the ground up, slicing through countless monsters and phantoms along the way. Obtaining the relic after moving to the capital with hardly any money in his pocket was Gilbert's luckiest break in life. Weapon relics were powerful in and of themselves, and for Gilbert, who wasn't very technical, a greatsword was the perfect weapon. Wielding the sword he had shared so many ups and downs with would certainly feel more reassuring, but Gilbert bit back the thought.
Instead, he glared at the crimson-tinted blade. Never! He bellowed, still flat on the ground.
He was miserable. He knew that the Purgatorial Sword was a powerful weapon. Back when he'd first acquired it, he had had it assessed at the Association, whose rep had been pretty surprised. It was far too rare of a relic to have been obtained in a level 1 treasure vault. Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsukikage, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. That was precisely why Gilbert couldn't reach for the sword. If he did, especially against an opponent without a weapon, he felt he would be crediting all of his accomplishments to that sword. Tino didn't attack further. After some time and some rest, Gilbert rose to his feet again.
Your pride is stupid.
Gilbert saw no opening in her stance. She hadn't broken a sweat, let alone shown any fatigue, yet even standing before a far inferior opponent, she didn't let her guard down for a second. Gilbert knew that if she really wanted him dead, he would have been mincemeat already. While he prided himself in his physical durability, Tino had the stuff to break him. Gilbert stooped low, panting through the pain. Hollering would be a waste of strength, so he eyed her down, beast-like. Was there an opening? What should he do? Tino looked frailer than him anyway. Just one hit should be enough. One heavy hit, but Gilbert's hit wouldn't land, even if he tried. After all, she had seen through every one of his earlier attacks. As Gilbert racked his brain for the slightest path to victory, Thousand Trick's voice entered his ears. The guy spoke in the same nonchalant tone as he'd used before the match. The other 3 spectators, who'd been pushed to the back of his mind, came back into focus. Why don't you give it a rest? You wanted confirmation that Tino's stronger than you, and I think you've had enough of it. You left your last party, didn't you? Gilbert choked on his breath and stared at Thousand Tricks. His mouth bore traces of a smile as he stood there, as intimidating as ever. An ordinary man with black hair, dark eyes, and a plain appearance, who showed no indication of having accumulated mana material. He didn't even wear the Steps or Grievers logo that he was supposed to wear. The fact that he didn't even look like a member made him even more unnerving. Gilbert had indeed left his party. He had had to leave the first party he had joined when he'd first come to the capital, a party he'd ventured with for nearly half a year. His party mates just hadn't been able to keep up. Thousand Tricks maintained his enigmatic smile, making Gilbert's hair stand on end. Even Gilbert, in his short time in the capital, had heard of this man, one of the best hunters who called the capital home, and the leader of Grieving Souls, a party entirely composed of hunters with titles, the penultimate indication of a hunter's prowess.
How did you?
I'd been there. You and your party didn't match up. I get it. The Grievers just aren't the type to leave a man behind. For a moment, Gilbert struggled to understand, and then the realization hit. Titles were reserved for the best of the best hunters, with exceptional talent, who had breezed through countless vaults. They were an honor far out of Gilbert's current reach, and yet Thousand Tricks, who led those Grievers whose talent was beyond compare, thought of them as nothing more than I think joining this party would be a good experience for you. I'm sure you have your reservations and the like, but I'd like to see you youngsters getting along. 1,000 Tricks had plenty of openings Gilbert could have gone for. Heck, his body looked weaker than Tino's. The dude looked so weak, Gilbert had pegged him for an utter wimp. Now, that same perception frightened him. Even now, after Gilbert had learned of his status and abnormal nature, the man still looked as weak as he had before. Before Gilbert knew what was happening, his hands and legs were quaking, his face was twitching and his lungs tightening. The inside of his mouth dried up as his eyes remained glued to the clanmaster. Treasure vaults were packed to the brim with monsters. Those who ate humans, those who pretended to be human, those with intelligence, those with special abilities, those who employed brute strength, and even those who tried to manipulate hunters by speaking to them. And yet Gilbert understood as little of the man before him as he did of phantoms. 1,000 Tricks. He had heard the name plenty of times, but had not heard a word about what kind of hunter he was. The clan master approached the purgatorial sword and tapped the blade with his foot. Instantly, crimson flames whirled out of the broad blade, roaring into a spiraling inferno. Gilbert couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Greg and Ruda watched in awe. Completely unfazed, 1,000 Tricks spoke from within the spiraling flames. An elemental buff and an expansion of attack range, huh? It's a simple sword, but a good one. Take good care of it. Fire had enveloped his arm like gauntlets, and his eyes were flickering red.
Now, way! You can't wield it! The Purgatorial Sword is a relic! A relic!
Relics were powerful items that required delicate manipulation. The more powerful a relic was, the more training was required to utilize even a fraction of its power. The flames writhed through the air, materializing into a pair of scorching wings on 1,000 Tricks' back.
You're not even touching the hilt! How is that even possible?
Even the Purgatorial Sword's owner had only recently managed to elevate it from a well-made but ordinary sword. Even then, Gilbert had only managed to coat the blade in flames. It wasn't that controlling a relic was difficult. He simply had no idea how to do so. Relics didn't come with labeled buttons and switches, nor did they come with a manual. Learning how to operate a relic wasn't something talent could solve. Since the relic belonged to Gilbert, he understood the impossibility of the feat he was witnessing. 1,000 Tricks grinned within the veil of flames, his black hair reflecting its ominous glow. It couldn't be. This man wasn't like Tino, who was simply further ahead in her training. 1,000 Tricks didn't so much as stand on the same path as Gilbert was climbing. He was an unknown. Upon witnessing this unimaginable sight, Gilbert heard his own voice quiver in terror like it was foreign to him.
Freak!
Tino continued to gaze down at Gilbert, unfazed. The shadow of 1,000 Tricks, projected by the roaring flames, looked like a spirit wailing in grief. Chapter 3. The White Wolf's Den. Through the expansive forest northwest of Zebrudia was a thin, unbeaten track that ran like a crack between the trees. At the very end of that track was the treasure vault in question. The White Wolf's Den. The vault had once been the territory of a large pack of monsters, the Silver Moons, wolves with coats that shone like the moon and repelled all kinds of magic attacks, powerful legs to weave through the woods, and piercing fangs to crunch through the body and armor of a well-built hunter. These beasts were intelligent enough to cast minor spells and hunt down stronger monsters by coordinating as a pack, earning them a reputation as reapers of the forest. Although Silver Moons were tough to take on, they had two key weaknesses. They grew to no more than a meter in length, and their entrancing moonglow for their namesake made them popular targets. Every part of a Silver Moon, their bones, their fangs, their fur was among the most valuable monster parts on the market, enough so for many a hunter to run the risks of venturing into the vault to reap the rewards. Thus, many Silver Moons fell prey to the greed of treasure hunters. Even a species of monster with intelligence, strength, and numbers was no match for hunters who outclassed them in each of those aspects. Monsters were of flesh and blood. No matter how powerful they were, they couldn't spontaneously materialize like the phantoms that roamed the vault. In fact, they were close to becoming wiped out entirely. As their numbers decreased in inverse proportion to the capital's boom in population, their increasingly scarce pelts became more valuable. Silver Moons, which had once been the terrors of the woods, were now nothing more than a big fat payday for any hunter lucky enough to cross one's path. By the time the capital had become known as the Holy Land of treasure hunting, the Silver Moons had disappeared, leaving the remnants of their once populous pack all over their extensive den. The den was supposedly empty, but about a decade ago, rumors had emerged of a blood-soaked wolf appearing there. Sheesh! It's gotta be restless spirits. They give me the heebie-jeebies. I shuddered, chucking the file aside. Just thinking about it made me want to barf. I was a wimp to begin with, but the other grievers knew that in haunted vaults like these, I was even more of a wimp. I wasn't the type to test my mettle telling ghost stories around a campfire. Heck, there was no mettle to test.
There's no need to quake so hard.
It just had to be a vault that can't let go of the past. Those things practically scream baggage. Treasure vaults, which materialized where there was an abundance of mana material, presented in one of three forms. Those completely unrelated to their location, those heavily influenced by their environment, or those that reflected historical events that had taken place there. Nations around the world were carrying out extensive research to identify patterns of treasure vault materialization, but they had yet to yield conclusive results. In any case, the White Wolf's den looked to be a combination of the second and third variety. A great crimson wolf had appeared out of nowhere, prowling the desolate den of its forebears eradicated by mankind. It's not that I had any sympathy for the Silver Moons or anything, but a tale like that sure creeped me out.
According to the testimony of a hunter who fought Silver Moons, this wolf is far stronger than those of the past.
And you can't even nab a pelt. No, thank you! Phantoms were tangible apparitions that materialized the same way treasure vaults did. Strength aside, they bore certain characteristics that distinguished them from monsters. For one, phantoms didn't leave a carcass behind. When destroyed, they reverted to mana material, immediately dissipating into the air. As if they really had been an illusion, very rarely a particularly well-manifest body part would be left behind, but stripping them of their pelts wasn't really an option. If hunters were going for day trips in a place like that and not making it back, no way in hell was that my problem. Eva was flipping through the file she had requested, looking contemplative rather than fearful. Perhaps she considered herself worlds away from the front lines.
Looking at this, the vault must have earned a level 3 for the strength of its phantoms rather than the difficulty of its layout or traps.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure they'll be fine. It's Tino we're talking about. A treasure vault's level was determined by its difficulty in all aspects, as well as the percentage of hunters who made it out of it alive. Vaults easier to navigate typically spawn stronger monsters and phantoms, and vice versa. Most hunters had a preference as to which they'd rather take on. Seeing as how Lil Gilbert and Tino were absolute muscleheads, I wasn't too worried. They could take care of a powerful phantom or two. In fact, Tino seemed to have moved 1 foot into freakdom since the last time I'd seen her fight. I suppose that was inevitable, but now there was no turning back for her.
I'm surprised Gilbert agreed to join.
I don't know. He probably did some self-reflection while Tino was beating him to a pulp. Or maybe when I asked him about his last party after that tip you gave me. Eva Renfied was an incredible person. While she didn't have any experience as a hunter, her managerial skills were top-notch. Since she still kept in touch with the trading company she used to work for, she could handle everything from purchasing supplies for the clan to gathering intel using her connections, and she even handled the occasional inspections from the higher-ups of the Empire. Researching Tino's 3 new party members had been no sweat for someone like her. Really, I should have been kissing the ground, she walked on. Just like I should have been doing around Ark. If there hadn't been a regulation stipulating that a clan master had to be a level 5 or higher hunter, she would have long been the master of the steppes, leaving me to peacefully retire. Recalling my conversation with Gilbert, I couldn't help but laugh. You should have seen the look on his face. I guess there is such a thing as having too much talent. Gilbert had been blown through treasure vaults like they were going out of style, to a point where the rest of his party couldn't keep up. It was a story all too common in this industry, especially because disparities in talent became all the more pronounced on the battlefield. What happened with my party was just one other example, and I'd witnessed plenty of other parties go through the same thing. That said, there were 2 differences between the Grievers and Gilbert's party. Gilbert had been the only party member with extraordinary talent, and he had chosen to leave the party over working out their differences. That made Gilbert and I exact opposites. I suspected that pride had prevented Gilbert from leaving his party more than anything else. He almost seemed too reckless, like he wanted to convince himself there was no turning back. He wouldn't be the first young prodigy to break up a party, and he wouldn't be the last. A situation like mine was much rarer to come by. Of course, the real victims here were Lil Gilbert's party members, who had been dragged through vault after vault they were underqualified for, only to explode into a row and lose a member.
Did you knock some sense into him?
Nope. I just said whatever came to mind. I probably knocked him down a peg, but I'm in no place to make any hunters see sense. My clan was chock full of hunters far worse than Lil Gilbert, like Tino with the creepy worship of me and Liz who must have whispered that nonsense into her student's ear. Who was I to lecture anyone about how to run their clan? I hated it when clan members came to me seeking advice about their interpersonal issues. That's not on me. Do what you want and leave me out of it.
If you say so.
As excellent as Eva was at her job, I had a feeling that she didn't always see things as they were. Not that I would ever dare complain to the woman who was single-handedly holding up the clan. I decided to change the subject before things got exhausting. Lil Gilbert's relic is actually pretty cool, you know?
The purgatorial sword, was it?
I smiled, recalling the great sword forged in the shape of a scorching flame. I loved relics. There was no denying their allure. In fact, they were the only thing that filled me with vigor. It was no wonder hunters far and wide risked their lives to pursue them. Best of all, anyone could use them. Absolutely anyone, regardless of talent or skill, could employ these relics to wield miraculous powers. Need I say more? I didn't use relics all that often myself, but that didn't mean they weren't awesome. That's the one. Say, do you think he'd sell it to me? It grants fire affinity and extends attack range, but maybe it has other effects I could look into. I doubted he'd sell it to me, though. Relics took a long time to get used to before a wielder could unleash their potential. Once a hunter grew accustomed to their relic, they were never too eager to let it out of their hands. As I continued, gushing about the wonderful qualities just one touch had revealed from the purgatorial sword, I noticed the reprimanding look in Eva's eyes. I must have gotten carried away again, so I made an effort to tone it down and play it cool.
We are trying to cut wasteful spending, Krai.
How would that be wasteful?
Elemental enhancement and range expansion, you have plenty of relics like that already.
Plenty? As if. Each relic was a one-of-a-kind object, the product of a unique natural phenomenon with its own distinct differences and quirks. I almost retorted as much. When I caught Eva's glare, remembering my place, I mousily answered, "Well, I guess those are common characteristics of weapon relics." A number of stores in the capital sold relics. Anyone in the city could get their hands on one with those specs as long as they didn't care about effectiveness or ease of use. Relics that were both powerful and easy to wield were much harder to come by. The purgatorial sword was much more forthright and easy to handle than any of the 7 other similar relics I'd laid my hands on so far. That explained how Lil Gilbert had in such a short period of time figured out how to use it. I doubted Eva would take that for an answer, though. Maybe she'd found out about me occasionally dipping my fingers in the clan account and using the dough to buy relics for myself, always replenishing the funds at a later date, of course. I eyed her up, but her all-seeing pale purple eyes gave nothing away of her thoughts. Running out of options, I forced a half-hearted smile and resorted to bribery. Anyway, do you wanna go get something sweet? Sugar was the ticket to sweetening people up.
You're only asking because you want some, aren't you?
Nana, that's totally untrue. When had Eva found out I had a sweet tooth? I kept that part of myself on a need-to-know basis to maintain my badass image. I really couldn't be too careful around her. The very temporary party members were sitting together at the table that Tino usually occupied alone. Each of them were looking at her, waiting for direction. She would have much preferred to take on the quest alone, but she was now stuck with this band of misfits. When her master had suggested they'd do just fine without Gilbert, she'd allowed herself a glimpse of hope. Now she realized that everything had gone according to her master's plan. The quest she'd been given was a search and rescue, which required the utmost urgency. There was no time to make thorough preparations. Tino looked from member to member of her party, preparing to give her first official words as their leader.
First, I need to write a will.
What? Wait a minute.
Tino should just about be there by now, huh? Oh, shoot. There I was, lazily polishing my hounding chain, when I suddenly remembered it was out of mana. Relics were powerful tools, but their effects weren't produced unconditionally. They were powered by mana, the same energy source that magi used to cast magic. The more powerful a relic, the more mana it required to function. This was one of the reasons hunters didn't lug around a ton of relics. Infusing relics with mana was easy enough, since mana flowed within every living creature. However, the reservoir of that mana varied greatly from subject to subject. Even magi, who held more mana than most life forms, could only charge a few relics before their mana would run out. Sadly, I possessed less mana than the average person, so I had my friends or clan members charge up my relics for me. The association recommended that hunters only carry as many relics as they could charge on their own, but what choice did I have? My piddly amount of mana was one of the reasons I'd tossed in the towel with frontline hunting. If only there were one thing I was good at. Mana wasn't a free resource either. I usually had my relics charged by Lucia, the Griever's Magus, but she wasn't around. I'd have to figure something else out for the time being. I rolled up my hounding chain and set off for the lounge. Warm rays from the setting sun streamed through the floor-length windows, basking the lounge in amber. Several of the tables there were populated by Steps members I recognized, apparently having returned from their day's work. I headed straight for one of the groups to butt in on their merry conversation. Expending mana was exhausting, so much so that mages could barely move when their mana ran empty. Usually I'd have to ask a skilled mage for my recharges, but I just needed the chain charged today. The leader of the party, a man with wiry black hair and a 5 o'clock shadow, noticed me and flashed me a grin. He seemed to be in a particularly good mood.
Hey, CM. Crazy night, huh?
It happens. Can I trouble you for a relic charge?
I suppose. How many guys do you need?
It's just for my chain, so one'll do.
No biggie.
Despite my sudden request, he took the hounding chain and passed it to a magus sitting at the table. She accepted it, just as content. A relic's mana naturally depleted over time whether they were used or not. I asked for recharges pretty frequently, so everyone there was used to it by now. Magi sometimes refused to waste their mana on me if their party was about to head out to a treasure vault, but most of the time my position as clan master was persuasive enough. That was all thanks to Eva, who did a great job prioritizing member satisfaction. The hounding chain glowed faintly as mana poured inside. Meanwhile, the leader began chatting to me.
Have you heard? A stray showed up on the northern road. The hit was small scale, but a merchant's caravan got taken out.
Zebrudia was a sprawling city. The roads leading in and out were far better equipped than those of other cities, and the monsters in its vicinity were regularly culled. Still, monsters did attack from time to time. On rare occasions, monsters and phantoms did approach the roads. These were what we called strays, which were feared by travelers. They were usually more powerful than most monsters or phantoms, and their appearance was tricky to predict in advance. No matter how developed an area was, bodyguards were always a good idea. Without an escort protecting me, I'd personally never set foot outside the city. Merchants had it pretty rough. Scary stuff. Is it a monster or a phantom? I guess if it wandered onto the road, it's a phantom. To the north of the capital lay a forest abundant in resources. The likelihood of a monster leaving the comforts of the woods to sniff out a caravan was relatively low. The leader looked up at me and gave a small nod.
Yeah, the Third Order has raised a warning and are calling for volunteers to take it out. It's a toughie. The caravan had 3 level 3 hunters on it.
No survivors, even with escorts? That's some tough luck. Monster deterrents didn't work on phantoms, which were composed of mana material. As a general rule, they seldom left their vaults, but the sheer number of vaults in the vicinity of the capital meant that once every few months, one would make its way to civilization. Still, there was nothing to worry about. The phantom must have been fairly tough to have taken out 3 level 3s, but phantoms, who didn't have physical bodies, didn't last long in a place with so little mana material. It took some time for a phantom to naturally fade out of existence, but it would grow weaker with time. With the Third Order whose duty was to keep the peace within the Empire on the job, it would be taken care of in no time. In any case, it wasn't my problem. The city, guarded by powerful knights, sturdy walls, and a robust population of hunters, was safe from any phantom. Without concern, I waited for my chain to finish charging.
According to the hunters who sought it, it's some kind of wolf phantom. The hunters working the caravan must have been caught off guard to get taken out like that on the open road.
Uh-huh. What? Wolf? Did he say wolf? I frowned at the word and recalled a map of the area. The White Wolf's den, the vault I'd thrown Tino into, was nestled in the forest by the northern road. It was easy to make the connection, since each vault produced the same set of phantoms, with little deviation. Oblivious to my creeping despair, the leader went on.
No doubt, they evolved in a neglected vault. That's what happens when there are too many vaults around, I guess. But that's sweet for us hunters.
W. Well, there are plenty of vaults up north. There are a bunch in the forest alone. If the phantom's a wolf, it's gotta be...
From the White Wolf's den, for sure.
Steps hunters sure knew their stuff. He seemed well informed on the vaults in the area. My stomach churning, I maintained my smile. Right, it could be the White Wolf's den. Or...
Huh? Is there another spot around here that spawns wolf phantoms? Nope. It fits the bill. The joint's pretty unpopular, 'cause of those low drop rates.
For real? I could feel my face stiffening, which was noted with curiosity by the magus charging my chain.
If a phantom made it out of there, the den's gotta be packed to the rafters. The association should send out another warning. Heck, the government might even put out an extermination request.
Killing phantoms wasn't very lucrative since they didn't leave behind a corpse, but once phantoms made their way out into the world and started disrupting commerce, it was a different story. Depending on the scale of the disruption, it wasn't uncommon for the government to pay the association a good sum of money to take care of the problem. Of course, there was still a possibility that the wolf had come from somewhere else. Even if it had come from the White Wolf's den, Tino was headed there with a team of 4, Lil Gilbert's relic in tow. They'd figure something out.
That wolf's strong, you know? Don't get yourself mauled trying to make a quick buck.
Little did they know the comment chilled me to the core. Mauled? Is it that bad? I've never been to the White Wolf's den, so how strong are we talking? A level 3 treasure vault would have pretty strong phantoms, no? That sounds all right. Tino's pretty strong too. Just in case, I decided to have the party check out the quest file. Just in case. I had no ulterior motives, I swear. Smiling, I took the request from my pocket and spread it out on the table. The leader's eyes widened as he read the request from top to bottom. Then he grinned again, looking impressed.
You're pulling my leg, CM. Acting like you hadn't heard about the wolf when you've already taken care of it.
Right. Uh-huh. Tino's on the case. His face immediately froze.
Tino, the level 4 Tino. You and your trials by fire.
His party mates had retreated into their chairs, their smiles stuck strangely on their faces. This always happened to me. I just had terrible luck and bad timing. I didn't do it on purpose. Okay? When was this caravan attacked anyway? How was I supposed to know about it? I might have been the clan master, but I was no taskmaster. If I'd known, I would have never sent the quest Tino's way. If I'd known, I would have picked another request. The thief-looking young man of the party poring over the file muttered.
Sure, it's a level 3 vault, but when level 5 hunters went missing, you threw in a level 4 soloer.
You know, to give her experience... Wait, level 5? Having finished charging my chains, the magus pointed at a line in the quest file.
Yeah. See, right here.
The section of the file contained a list of hunters who needed rescuing, which I glossed over without a second thought. The magus saw something in it, apparently.
That Rudolph Davos, a level 5 hunter, then he has a pretty famous spike. I see him pretty often around the association.
Shut up, idiot. Our clan master knows everything about every hunter in the capital and every treasure vault there is. He's sorry about that, CM. Ina didn't mean anything by it.
The party leader smiled stiffly. Ina the mage apologized too. All I could manage was a bleak smile and a don't worry about it wave of a hand. What's this about me knowing everything? I can barely match my clan members' names to their faces. Who's out there spreading unrealistic rumors about me? I had too many guesses. How was I supposed to know about hunters outside of the clan? The only time I set foot in the association branch nowadays was when I was getting my ass slapped. What? Do these guys really think I know every hunter out there? How many hunters do they think there are in the capital alone? I took a deep breath and told myself to calm down. I never would have sent Tino if I had known a level 5 hunter had gone missing, but personality flaws aside. Tino was a reliable hunter. It wasn't time to panic yet. Come to think of it, when I showed her the file, Tino did mention something about her only being level 4. Damn that Gark, pinning such a dangerous quest on us. Tino's blood will be on his hands. I took another deep breath. More importantly, I had to maintain my dignity, however surface level it was, as the clan master. I wouldn't have minded, nay, I would have welcomed being ousted from my position, but there was much more at stake right now. It'll be a good learning experience. Don't worry, I sent her with 3 outsiders to back her up. Even Lil Gilbert had shown signs of following Tino's lead, and Ruda and the Great Greg had to be better than nothing. The leader didn't react as expected, only twitching the last remnant of his smile.
You shackled her on an already difficult mission, So this is how the infamous leader made the Grievers the best party in the capital.
Those talented hunters, those freaks, were looking at me with a mix of fear and respect. Infamous? What are they talking about? I felt so beaten down that I could no longer keep up my smile. The leader shot to his feet, looking like he'd just come face to face with a monster in the wild. I reached for the recharged hounding chain on the table and clicked it into place on my belt. Then I cleared my throat, re-establishing my badass exterior. Sorry, but there's something I need to attend to. I'm heading off. Thanks for the charge.
No, not at all. I'm sorry to have wasted your time with all that.
His once friendly demeanor replaced with terrified formality. By now, members of the clan were staring at us from other tables in the lounge. Ugh, this is bad. They're gonna think I'm some sadistic bastard who forced Tino into a suicide mission. It wasn't like that! I didn't do it on purpose! I turned on my heel and hurried to the clan master's office, unsure of where else to go. Ark was out when I needed him most. The same went for the Grievers. Normally, hunters prepped extensively before embarking on a quest, but since this was a rescue mission, I'd rushed Tino's party on their way. They should have arrived at the vault by now. There was no time. It's okay, I muttered as my mind spun. It's okay. The Purgatorial Sword. They have the Purgatorial Sword. Then it occurred to me, during the little tussle between Tino and Gilbert, I'd used up all of the Great Sword's mana. I wondered if Lil Gilbert had remembered to recharge his relic before heading out to the treasure vault. The memory carved into the deepest recesses of Tino Shade's mind was one of her mentor, following their first real sparring match after several months of basic training.
You get it, T?
Her mentor asked with a smile. In stark contrast to Tino, who was heaving on the ground, dog-tired, Liz showed not a single bead of sweat. She tied her pink hair into a ponytail, her peach-colored eyes were framed by luscious lashes, her unblemished skin bronzed by the sun. No one would have denied how adorable she looked. From her ears dangled a pair of metallic heart-shaped earrings. Her limbs were slender, without a pinch of excess mass on them, and her breasts were modest compared even to Tino's flatlands. She was shorter than Tino, which had, when Tino had first sought her mentor's tutelage, led to people mistaking the apprentice for the senior of the two. No one dared to suggest that now.
If Krai says crows have white feathers, they have white feathers. Do you see the point I'm trying to make?
She asked, holding up her forefinger as if teaching a child right from wrong. The power Tino felt emanating from her mentor's minuscule frame far exceeded that of any being she'd come across before. It was hard to believe that they were only a few years apart in age. There was once a group of hunters who had risen to glory faster than any other freaks who time and time again breezed through deadly treasure vaults that had ended the careers of countless hunters before them. Tino and the rest of the second generation of talented hunters were merely following in their footsteps. Hence, Tino had never once prided herself on her talent. Her mentor, Liz Smart, the stifled shadow, was a member of that legendary party. Watching Liz dash like a gust of wind through land and sky, like a shadow in the night, filled Tino with fear and admiration. Although Liz was smiling, her eyes glinted with electrifying energy.
I'm not talking about loyalty or love. What I want from you, T, is absolute obedience.
A line like that would have enraged a more hot-tempered hunter. Liz was dead serious, though. The back of Tino's neck singed with uneasiness.
I don't want you to question a single word Krai says.
Liz peered into Tino's eyes, captivating her. A moment passed before Liz resumed her almost lyrical lesson.
It doesn't matter if you think it's a ridiculous joke, a nonsensical order, or even a command that puts your life in danger. I need you to obey his will, no questions asked. Crush every single enemy that opposes Krai. It doesn't matter if there's some powerful noble, a masterful hunter, or the Emperor of Zebrudia. I can't stand the thought of those filthy rebels being alive even for a second. That's why I made you my apprentice. When I'm around, I'll slaughter them all. But I can't be with Krai 24/7. You understand, don't you, T? You're a smart girl.
Tino was panting, still on the ground.
Yes, Lizzie.
Talented hunters were sometimes described as freaks. Tino knew that not all hunters were equally freakish. Her mentor, however, was undeniably a freak that instilled fear even in fellow hunters. Her spiel, which she had given in an almost jesting tone, carried with it a scorching undertone that burned any thought of defiance to the ground. Liz was serious. She saw everything in the world as a foe, and there was no room in her world for concessions. If Tino had shown any animosity towards Krai, her mentor would have killed her on the spot, snapping Tino like a weed to be picked. Shorter and more slender than Tino, Liz looked the same as any normal human being, but that resemblance stopped at her looks. Tino only realized this some time later, once she had gained a little experience as a hunter. The wary party traversed the narrow forest path, en route to the White Wolf's den. Tino led the pack, followed by Gilbert, Greg, and then Ruda as their rear guard. Hunter parties were meant to be formed with a balance of roles in mind. Each typically required a frontline fighter, a long-range fighter, a scout, and a healer. Tino's makeshift party lacked a mage who could annihilate a large horde in one fell swoop, and a cleric who could heal severe injuries. Both were considered essential for surviving high-level vaults. Greg and Gilbert were frontline fighters. Greg, a warrior who comfortably handled a variety of weapons, and Gilbert, a swordsman who specialized in one-on-one combat using his greatsword. They were each the quintessential frontline fighter, with enough physical strength to hold off the supernatural powers of a phantom, but without the finesse to handle magic attacks or a swarm of phantoms at once. Meanwhile, Ruda and Tino were both thieves who fell short on pure strength, but they made up for it in their ability to scout out enemies. Despite the sheer lack of balance in the party, the two thieves were its silver lining. Ruda's days as a solo hunter had made her careful and alert, a department Tino too could hold her own in. Even if the party's surroundings were to be obscured, a hostile phantom wouldn't get the jump on them. Ambushes were a hunter's number one concern when traversing an unfamiliar vault. At least Tino's ragtag band had no reason to fear them. The party's first concern was to figure out what was going on inside the vault. Even before they arrived there, an uncanny air swathed the woods. The march was tense. Something was in the air that only hunters who regularly faced monsters and phantoms could sense. Now, what sounded like a howl reverberated from somewhere beyond the trees. Greg scanned their surroundings and grunted.
Weird. Do you guys sense that? Whatever it is, it's not good. We haven't even made it to the vault yet, damn it.
That's why I left a will. I didn't have a choice.
Hunters had a sixth sense for danger. Once their senses became too enhanced by mana material for their brains to process the stuff, warning bells for death manifested as hunches. If you get a bad feeling, run for your life. That was one of the cardinal rules of treasure hunting. Tino and her party mates had all learned that, one way or another. The party was disquieted by whatever lurked in the forest. Tino, however, showed no fear. Only determination. Once she sensed the danger, she should have prioritized the survival of the party, especially since the abnormality was threatening enough for the other members to pick up on. However, when it came to this quest in particular, Tino and her party knew what they'd signed up for. Tino had laid all the dangers out in advance, regardless of whether they'd taken her word for it. Ruda, who had been carefully following along at the rear, recalled Tino's words and serious expression. If he's giving this quest to me, it's not going to be easy. I don't plan on dying, but I'm writing this just in case. At the time, Ruda had thought it some kind of joke, but the glaring danger in the shadows left no room for doubt.
Are you saying Krai knew what was going on and sent us in anyway?
Tino nodded.
Ow. Our party composition is no coincidence either.
You can't be serious. Ain't that a bit of a reach?
Krai had acted like his appointment of Tino's party members was arbitrary or off the top of his head. However, she, a master in all things her master, saw right through it. Tino was one of the original members of the Steps. Even before the clan was formed, she had often interacted with the Grievers. Her treasure hunting career entailed backbreaking training leading up to equally backbreaking trials. This wasn't the first time Krai had entrusted her with a quest. She understood now, though she couldn't believe it at first, that the Grieving Souls had only attained the glory and recognition not because of the sum of each member's talent, but because of the mastermind behind it.
Master knows everything that's happening at the vault and has assembled the necessary members to form a party.
She looked at Gilbert.
Even that test of strength of yours was only a part of that process.
Gilbert went wide-eyed, now with less bark and bite since the sparring match.
Hey, wait! The necessary members? It was a coincidence that I showed up to the recruitment meet. Doesn't your clan have loads more hunters more talented than me?
That's right. I'd never met Thousand Tricks before yesterday.
They continued their protest, refusing to believe. Tino let out a small sigh. Even though they weren't quite at the vault, their commotion would more than likely attract the attention of monsters or phantoms. Maybe even this added layer of difficulty was all according to her master's calculations. Regardless, Tino wanted to get this quest over with and return to the clan, alive. In order to do that, she had to make her new party members understand that nothing about their circumstances was accidental. Tino couldn't imagine what they were about to face, but understanding the gravity of their mission made all the difference.
Master is privy to all treasure vaults and hunters in the capital. He could easily predict your actions even if he has never met you in person.
Everyone in the steps knew that much. Krai never did anything without good reason. Why else would a level 8 show up late to his own recruitment event, rile up the crowd until the bar was nearly razed to the ground, and even find amusement in Gilbert's rage by delegating the sparring match against him to Tino? Krai wasn't an idiot, it was all an act. Tino could hardly believe her eyes, but there was no other explanation. His deception was too meticulous, too elaborate. 1,000 tricks played 1,000 moves ahead. Gilbert swallowed his words. He had sensed an unfathomable quality in Krai. Perhaps 1,000 tricks really could pull something like this off before breakfast. The purgatorial sword weighed heavily on Gilbert's back. Among the many types of magic was the technique to add elements like fire and water to a weapon to boost that weapon's output and range. Weapon-type relics often had affinity-granting attributes that produced the same effect without a magus having to cast a spell. The fire affinity of the purgatorial sword set the blade ablaze, allowing its wielder to scorch their slashed enemies. The sword had been effective on every foe so far, but now, 1,000 tricks had manipulated the sword's flames, which was far more than Gilbert had ever accomplished. If that was a glimpse into the true power of the sword, Gilbert had only mastered a small fragment of its potential. Gilbert was no rookie when it came to taking on treasure vaults, but he had never felt such a dreadful feeling about what was to come as he did about this one. He just couldn't shake it. Seeing how nervous the rest of her party was, Tino decided to take a more reassuring approach.
Don't worry, Master knows all. He wouldn't give us a quest we can't complete. If we're all ready to risk our lives, we'll make it through. There's no turning back no matter what. That's why I wrote the will.
Right. Sure thing.
He made an attempt at a smile. He wasn't going to let these youngsters see that every bone in his body was telling him to bolt. Why was Tino so determined to risk their lives for a carcass-collecting gig? A shadow fell over them, blocking out the sunlight. Tino was first to notice the thing falling from the sky and shoved Greg out of the way. A second later, a dullish gray glint flew past where his neck had been moments before. Gilbert and Ruda hopped back, preparing for combat. Greg, knocked off balance, caught himself on the ground. It was then that they caught sight of their assailant, the silhouette that had snuck up on them without a scent or sound. Wide-eyed, Ruda watched the crimson beast, now quietly kneeling on the ground.
I thought the phantom was supposed to be a wolf.
Gilbert stared into the glittering golden eyes directed at him, and then pointed the purgatorial sword at the beast. The crimson figure, having missed its surprise attack, rose lazily to its hind legs. Its crimson fur was wiry, its canine ears sharp. A thick tail that matched its coat extended from its hindquarters. The figure's nose twitched, as if sniffing out the hunting party. Incredibly, the beast was almost entirely clad in blood-red armor. Underneath its gauntlets, the beast was clutching a weapon. It swung the tip of its blade in the air, as if in warning.
It's wearing armor. This is all wrong.
It's holding a sword. Touché, Master. I never would have expected this.
They had been told that the phantoms of the White Wolf's den took the shape of a giant wolf. Only the beast's face and color matched the description they had been given. As if to drown out Tino's words, the Crimson Wolf Knight roared. I'm gonna barf. It's really time I quit. 10 minutes had passed since I'd been told about the unexpected dangers of what anyone would have thought was a piece of cake carcass-collecting gig. Now alone, I paced the clan master's office, muttering curses into the air. It was a good thing Eva wasn't there to judge me. If Tino had just refused the request and let me know why, I would have... Was grumbling really all I could bring myself to do? Talk about being unproductive. Tino was far more important to me than some randos I'd sent her to rescue. I mean, for all I knew, they were already dead. That said, Tino was level 4-. She knew the fundamentals of hunting. If things got dicey, she'd bring the party back. On the other hand, everyone else in the steppes had proven themselves unbelievably reckless, completely disregarding the basic guidelines that kept most hunters alive. No matter how fearsome an enemy they faced, a member of the steppes wouldn't retreat that easily. Tino must have been corrupted by them. Well, the most reckless hunters I knew were the Grievers, so she'd most likely gotten that from her mentor. Just use Lil Gilbert and the Great Greg as meat shields if you have to, I pleaded into the air. Surely, they'd have no regrets, dying to protect Tino. I'd been too thoughtless when picking her party members. At the very least, I should have given her some reliable members from the steppes. Damn you, Gark. Why didn't you give me a heads up? Actually, no. There was no excuse for this. No amount of mental gymnastics could let me weasel out of this one. It was all my fault. I could do nothing but grovel on the floor, screaming silent apologies. But hey, I was sure they'd be fine. Tino knew the White Wolf's den spawned big wolves. She'd be well prepared. The wolves were like, only a little scarier than a normal wolf in the wild. They weren't exactly tricky phantoms to deal with. Tino would make it, Tino should make it. That's what I kept telling myself, but I was hardly reassured. It was already dark outside. Street lamps illuminated the capital streets, but there were no artificial lights in the woods. Could I ask any of the clan members in the lounge for backup? No dice. Monsters and wild animals were most active at night, so no one wanted to travel when it was dark out. Besides, even if I sent someone right away, they wouldn't catch up to Tino. I knew it. I'm useless without Ark. Almost in denial, I made up my mind and walked up to the bookshelf that lined a wall of the office, which was filled with books on topics like clan management and the history of the capital. I reached for an awkwardly positioned knob and yanked it. The mechanism kicked in, and the bookshelf swung silently inward. Through the opening it produced, I could see a set of stairs leading downwards. I hurried down the steps. At the bottom of them, I felt the wall for the light switch. When I flicked it, soft lamplight illuminated a room about twice the size of the office above. This was my own private quarters. The room had no windows and contained a bed large enough for a whole party to sleep in, a bookshelf, a coffee table, a desk, and a couch. On the walls were bizarre paintings that had been gifted to me, along with a poster that outlined the 3 rules of the clan. Most glaringly, the room was filled to the brim with relic swords, lances, sets of armor, coats, chains, rings, and so many more in varying shapes and sizes. Some of them I'd bought. Some of them I'd been gifted. And of course, some of them I'd scored from treasure vaults. The loot before me was the culmination of my party's career as the Grieving Souls. Just by selling all the relics in the room for a fair price, the Grievers could have easily retired in abject opulence, but we were yet to finish what we'd started. My stomach churning, I began rummaging for a relic that could dig me out of this impossible hole. Just as I was re-entering the office, I bumped into Eva. She looked towards the open bookshelf door, then blinked at me. Now that I was decked out in the relics I'd so quickly but meticulously picked out, I looked like a walking treasure vault. I was wearing my indigo overcoat and had a crossbow relic and a sword relic of an awkward length slung on my back. I had a ring relic on every finger, and as if that weren't enough, more of them dangling on the chain relic at my waist. Even more ring relics were stuffed into the pouch I'd attached to my belt. There were a hell of a lot of ring relics out there, but come on, a man only has 10 fingers. My clothes under the coat were ordinary hunter's garb, durable and lightweight. Those were probably the only things on me that weren't relics. However, even with all those relics, I still felt like I had to barf, dreading what could possibly happen. Through experience, I had learned that no amount of relics made much of a difference when it came to making a talentless schmuck capable. So what? I was going to do everything in my power. This was on me. The Vice Clan Master was wearing her usual white uniform, looking as alert as ever, despite the late hour. The studious administrator that she was, Eva must have still been working, but there was no surprise in her gaze directed at the open bookshelf. By now, almost everyone in the clan knew where my quarters were.
What's with all that gear, Krai?
I'm going for a walk. Ava stared at me exasperatedly.
If you were gonna worry so much, you shouldn't have given her the quest.
Crumbling under the pressure of the situation, I couldn't stop my awkward laugh. Hee-ha. I don't know what you're talking about. Eva saw right through me, but not because of my arsenal of relics. I pretty much always covered myself with them. After years of us working together, she could read me like a book.
Why don't you take another party as backup?
The suggestion was tempting, but asking a favor of another party was different than asking a favor of your own party, even if we were in the same clan. At this hour, I doubted any party would be willing to venture to a dangerous vault, and I couldn't expect them to. Steadying my breath, I decided to reassure Eva. There's no problem. This is all according to plan.
Wait.
Completely ignoring my desperate bravado, Eva quickly approached me, her eyes on the necklace I wore, a simple necklace with a metallic capsule at the end. It wasn't a relic, but it was far more dangerous than any relic down in my room.
Isn't that Citri's slime?
I didn't say a word.
Isn't that the one you're not supposed to touch because it could destroy the entire city?
She stared into the capsule without reaching for it, showing a healthy sense of caution. I wondered who'd told Eva about it. A few faces came to mind, but I'd deal with that later. The capsule had been stored in a safe-type relic in the middle of my room. A modified slime was supposed to be contained in it, but I'd never seen that slime myself. Slimes were by far the weakest monsters of all time. Their liquid bodies were basically bags of internal organs. Slice them or dice them, strike them or burn them, they went down with ease. They came in many varieties, but most were unnoteworthy. Even I, Krai Andrey, the weakest of the weak, could easily take on the average slime. But the one inside the capsule was different, according to its creator, anyway. I tried to stay on top of recharging my relics so I could use them, but most of them were running on empty, having not been charged since the Grievers left for a vault 2 weeks prior. I'd chosen the capsule to compensate. Tino was a good hunter, who'd be totally fine, and I would avoid any combat at all cost. Still, I decided to pack an ace up my sleeve, being the careful badass that I was. I didn't want to bring the capsule. In fact, I hated the thought of it, but the other non-relic weapons in my arsenal weren't light enough for me to carry. I wasn't even clear on how to use the slime when it came down to it. I'd be in a vault though, so I figured I could chuck it and run. I'd do anything to save our dear mascot. Very funny, Ava. That'd be a blatant violation of Imperial law. I prided myself in being a lawful citizen. My friends, however, saw laws as challenges rather than strict guidelines. Before Ava saw through my facade, I hurried to the large window behind my desk and swung it open, letting in a breeze colder than I had expected. The windows in the building were made to open, or else some people would just break through them. This time, it worked to my advantage. Eva watched me, unusually concerned, her eyes locked on Citri's slime. That concern was most likely of the professional kind, over whether my actions would negatively impact the clan.
Are you sure you'll be all right?
With all my strength, I retained my beaming smile. I was doomed. Believe me, if I could, I would have taken backup, but my night hiker could only be used by one person.